Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Anna Repkina. Anna Repkina, a 27-year-old woman from Cheliabinsk, Russia, she was a bright and ambitious individual from a good family. Her outlook on life was optimistic, and she yearned for love. Anna dreamed of getting married, starting a family, and building a home. Those who knew her remembered her infectious sense of humor and delightful personality. However, in 2016, Anna's world was turned upside down when her high school sweetheart ended their relationship of 7 years. Despite her heartbreak, she was determined to find true love and live a happy, fulfilling life. Anna decided to try online dating and signed up for several websites. She quickly matched with a man named William Hargrove on a Russian dating site. William, a 26-year-old from Oregon. He showered her with kindness and compliments, making an effort to be present for her despite the distance between them. People who know William describe him as a charismatic and humorous person. As Anna and William's online relationship progressed, they spoke every day and became more serious over the course of a few months. They shared many common interests, and Anna and William got along very well. William was the sweetest, he kept sending her flowers. Soon, they started talking about meeting in person. The chemistry was already there over the cell phone. Anna and William decided to meet in person, taking their months-long relationship one step further. In December 2016, Anna booked a flight to visit William in Oregon. However, there was a mix-up. Anna had accidentally booked a ticket to Portland, Maine, instead of Portland, Oregon. By the time the mistake was discovered, Anna had already arrived in Maine. Determined to spend the Christmas holidays with William, Anna rebooked her flight and arrived in Oregon just in time. William was there to greet her at the airport. Over the next 10 days, they experienced the ultimate festive romance. William also introduced Anna to his friends. And they shared a magical New Year's Eve countdown together, sealing their connection with a romantic kiss at midnight. At the end of Anna's 10-day visit, William proposed to her with his grandmother's emerald ring, and she accepted. However, what Anna didn't know was that William was already involved with someone else, his landlord, Michelle Chavez. Michelle was a 33-year-old married woman with 2 kids, but that didn't stop her and William's romantic relationship, which had been going on for over a year. When Anna visited William, she met Michelle, who was introduced to her as William's landlord, unaware of the true nature of their relationship. Michelle seemed to be aware of William's intentions to propose to Anna, but she didn't reveal their secret, possibly because she believed William would never leave her. Anna had returned to Russia after getting engaged to William and posted a picture of her ring on Facebook. The post appeared on Michelle's homepage, revealing the shocking news. Michelle was not only angry that her boyfriend, William, was engaged to another woman, but Michelle had also planned to leave her husband for him. In fact, Michelle had already taken off her wedding ring and given it to William as a symbol of her commitment. What Michelle didn't know was that William had given Anna the same ring that Michelle had given him. When Michelle confronted William about the engagement, he downplayed the situation, claiming that Anna meant nothing to him and that he would break off the engagement. However, on March 1, 2017, Anna returned to Oregon, ready to start her new life with William, bringing her wedding dress and a suitcase with her. She had even quit her job, expecting to be with William forever. Michelle was unhappy about the situation. Anna's mother, Yelena, had previously expressed concerns about her daughter moving to a new country for a man she barely knew. Yelena thought Anna was moving too quickly, but Anna insisted she was in love and didn't see the need to wait. Yelena eventually gave her blessing. However, Michelle was furious when she realized Anna's visit was actually a permanent move. She asked William to find a new place to live, as she didn't want the engaged couple staying with her. William agreed and rented an apartment for himself and Anna. Despite this, William continued to secretly visit Michelle, reassuring her of his commitment to her and downplaying his relationship with Anna. Michelle grew increasingly worried about how serious Anna and William's relationship was becoming, so she decided to take action. She contacted Anna on Facebook and revealed everything that had been going on behind her back. Anna shared with William everything Michelle had told her, but he dismissed it as mere jealousy from an ex-girlfriend. Anna trusted William's explanation and decided to move forward with their wedding plans. They had set a date of March 23rd to get married by the sea. Anna wore the wedding dress she had brought from Russia, but the officiant failed to arrive. After a long wait, they returned home. According to William, the officiant was ill, and Anna believed him. However, William had been clear about his feelings. He didn't love Anna and saw her as unimportant. Despite this, Anna refused to accept the reality of the situation. Michelle was exhausted with the situation. On April 15th, she had reached her limit and told William he had to make a decision, her or Anna. Michelle made it clear that she wouldn't tolerate him leading a double life any longer. Michelle told William that if Anna wasn't out of the picture by Thursday, April 20th, she would take drastic action. When she said she would build a snowman, Michelle meant that she would harm or kill Anna and hide the body in a remote, cold location where it would never be found. After her conversation with William, Michelle couldn't reach him. She assumed he had chosen Anna and left him several voicemails to express her feelings. However, the next day, Sunday, April 16th, William called Michelle and told her that he was now single. He explained that he and Anna had broken up and she was returning to Russia. It was Easter Sunday, and Michelle had been attending a family gathering. However, Michelle left her family's celebration to meet William. They of them reconnected and reaffirmed their relationship by being intimate in William's car. On April 17th, Anna's body was discovered in a forest, but the investigators had no idea who she was. She didn't have any identification on her and had only been in the state for about a month, making it difficult to start the investigation. There was no murder weapon at the scene, but among the trash scattered around her body was a clear plastic bag. Inside the bag, detectives found a KFC receipt, an empty Pepsi cup, and a used KFC chicken wrapper. The KFC receipt turned out to be a crucial piece of evidence. The receipt contained the date, time stamp, and debit card number, which led investigators to Kevin Thomas, the owner of the debit card. Kevin, it turned out, was a close friend of William's. When questioned, Kevin revealed that he and William were very close. Kevin also mentioned that he and William had a tradition of going to KFC for lunch every Friday. The receipt was from a purchase made about a week before William was questioned by the police. During the questioning, the police mentioned that they had found garbage from KFC in the trash, which they believed was from the previous week. William acknowledged that he and Kevin regularly went to KFC on Fridays. It was revealed that Kevin had paid for his meal with a credit card, while William had paid in cash. Kevin had previously told the police about William's complicated relationship situation, which had only come to light during the investigation into Anna's death. Kevin also mentioned that William had borrowed his shotgun, but had not returned it. According to Kevin, William had said he wanted to borrow the shotgun to go to the woods and relieve some stress. After hearing Kevin's statement, the police began to focus their attention on William and Michelle. From the day Anna died, William had been acting strangely and suspiciously. Following the death of his fiancée, Mr. William Hargrove was witnessed displaying unusual behavior. He withdrew funds from her bank account and spent them on items such as cigars and Star Wars Legos. He justified these purchases to his friend Kevin by saying he was trying to alleviate his grief. However, this behavior was compounded and Mr. Hargrove began researching time travel, even going so far as to offer his soul in exchange for the opportunity to travel back in time. When asked why he wanted to travel back in time, Mr. Hargrove explained that he wanted to return to April 16th to prevent his friend from making a mistake. However, this claim appears dubious, as on the same date, Mr. Hargrove was recorded crying in the arms of a store employee, claiming his girlfriend had left him. This raises doubts about the sincerity of his claim, particularly as he had been living with Michelle, despite her not being his anymore. William was taken into custody by the police and questioned. Initially, they asked him about his whereabouts on April 16. William stated that he had gone for a drive with Michelle. However, when questioned about his relationship with Anna, William claimed they were just acquaintances, having met while walking in downtown Corvallis. He told the police that they had gone on 2 dates, but he had made it clear to her that he wasn't interested in pursuing a romantic relationship. According to William, he last saw Anna in mid-March. He also mentioned that Anna had mistakenly posted about their engagement on Facebook, which caused tension with his actual partner, Michelle. The police then asked William about the trash found near the area where his acquaintance, Anna, was last seen. William admitted to littering, but claimed that he had disposed of his trash, including KFC waste and a trash can. Lieutenant Chris Duffett, one of the investigators who questioned William Hargrove, revealed that trash that implicated him had been found near Anna's body. Initially, William pretended to be shocked and distressed upon hearing this. However, his demeanor quickly changed and he requested a lawyer. Despite denying any involvement, William was arrested on April 19, 2 days after the body of Anna Repkina was discovered. Following William's arrest, Michelle was also brought in for questioning. When questioned about her whereabouts on April 16, Michelle provided a rehearsed alibi, stating that she and William spent the day driving together after he picked her up from her mother's house. However, her story changed later as she admitted to lying initially. She then claimed that William had planned to call and pick her up, but never followed through. During the interrogation, the police revealed shocking information to Michelle. Her boyfriend of a year and a half was now in custody for murder. Her initial reaction was surprisingly calm, but when the investigator pointed out her unusual reaction, Michelle's emotions finally surfaced. William was facing serious charges, including murder, identity theft, and 2 counts of theft. His trial began in October 2019, nearly a year after his indictment in June 2018. The prosecution was pushing for the maximum penalty, presenting a strong case against William with evidence and a clear motive. However, the defense argued that William was innocent and that Michelle, his scorned lover, was the real culprit. Evidence suggested that William had a motive to commit the crime, as he was being pressured by another lover to choose between Anna and Michelle. Additionally, records showed that William and Anna had driven together in the same car on the day of the murder. Furthermore, cell phone records placed William near the crime scene at 4:30 p.m. on the day of the murder, near Logging Road. The gun used to kill Anna was discovered in William's car, with only his fingerprints on it. William was using Anna's money to go shopping and pay his car insurance. He was even caught withdrawing cash from an ATM using her card. According to the prosecution, William had driven Anna to a secluded forest area where he killed her with his shotgun in a deliberate and calculated manner. The motive, they argued, was that William had to choose between Anna and Michelle, and he chose to eliminate Anna. Michelle explained how she met William and the nature of their relationship. She was a late-night cab driver, and her husband was a university instructor. However, their marriage was loveless. One evening, she met William at the bar where he worked. She began a romantic relationship with him. Over time, they grew extremely close, and William even rented a room in her house to be nearer to her. Michelle and William had an open relationship. When Anna first appeared, Michelle was not worried. However, when Anna visited more often, Michelle felt threatened, especially when she saw her wedding ring on Anna's finger. Michelle forced William to choose between her or Anna, but she insisted that she had nothing to do with William's actions that hurt Anna. She stressed that she never intended for Anna to be hurt or worse, killed. Michelle addressed the defense's allegations against her. She explained that the building a snowman threat was a joke, albeit an extreme one. She admitted that her cell phone was found in the forest, but claimed that William had driven her there without her knowledge of his intentions. Finally, Michelle stated that William had given her Anna's cell phone the day before he was questioned by authorities, and she had kept it for him because he was her partner. After nearly a month of court appearances, the judge requested a verdict from the jury. Deliberations took under 3 hours, and ultimately, the defense was unable to link Michelle to Anna's death. Unlike William, Michelle had no forensic evidence tying her to the crime scene or the weapon. Multiple witnesses corroborated her alibi, confirming that she was at her mother's house celebrating Easter at the time of the incident. William pleaded not guilty, but due to overwhelming evidence, he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. His lawyer indicated that they would file an appeal. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, known to many as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway, northwestern Pennsylvania. Her parents, William and Jane Gallagher, were a significant influence on her early life. Her father managed a newspaper, while her mother was a dedicated school teacher, which later shaped her path. As a child, Susan demonstrated a clear passion for learning and a natural love for literature, following in her mother's footsteps. She pursued higher education at Grove City College, where she met Kenneth Reinert, a young Air Force enlistee. Their chance encounter blossomed into a romance as they studied together. Susan's determination paid off as she earned her bachelor's degree. After achieving her initial goal, Susan pursued further education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University in 1966. She had married Kenneth in 1965, shortly after graduating from Grove City College, and they began a life filled with adventure as a military couple, moving to various duty stations across the country. Their military life took them to different parts of the country, including Sacramento, California, Rome, New York, and even Puerto Rico, before they eventually settled in the Philadelphia region. However, in 1971, Susan and Kenneth decided to separate, marking the end of their marriage. Despite the divorce, they parted ways amicably, without any legal disputes. As a single mother, Susan focused on creating a warm and loving home for her 2 children, Karen and Michael. She was a dedicated teacher and a beloved colleague and educator at Chestnut Walled Elementary School, known for her friendly and warm nature. Outside of her professional life, Susan was actively involved in Parents Without Partners, playing a crucial role in the Valley Forge chapter. After her mother's death, Susan found comfort in her connection with the organization Parents Without Partners. Despite facing challenges, she remained strong, relying on the organization for support. As she navigated her grief and a significant inheritance, her life became increasingly complex. However, she seemed to be managing well thanks to her strong ability to cope and a supportive network. On the evening of June 22, 1979, Susan and her 2 children spent what would be their last day together. Earlier that day, her son Michael had spent time with his father Kenneth, a personnel officer at Fidelity Bank. They had played in a father-son softball game, but left early when Susan arrived to pick Michael up around 8:30 p.m. Later that evening, Michael called his father to apologize for leaving the game early. Susan also called her former in-laws, Florence and John Reinhardt, with whom she remained close despite her divorce. With a full tank of gas, Susan was prepared for the drive to Allentown, Pennsylvania, about an hour north. She planned to attend a Parents Without Partners conference and use the trip as a weekend getaway with her children. Susan had planned a weekend getaway with her 2 children, Karen, 11 years old, and Michael, 10 years old. They were supposed to leave on Saturday morning to attend events, but on Friday evening, around 9 p.m., they unexpectedly departed. The children had been outside collecting hailstones from a summer storm, and shortly after, neighbors heard Susan's car start up and saw it leave the driveway. Susan had been having an affair with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher, which had put a strain on her marriage to Kenneth. Rumors had circulated that Susan and Bradfield might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan visited her boyfriend before embarking on a trip with her children to Allentown, about 49 miles north. They had planned to spend the night in a motel, but instead of arriving at their destination, Susan and her children vanished. 2 days after Susan Reinert and her children vanished, the community cared for them deeply was overcome with concern and uncertainty. On June 25, 1979, their fears were realized when Susan's orange Plymouth hatchback was found in the Hostin Hotel parking lot in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, her body was discovered in the back of the vehicle. The details of her death were horrific. Susan's body was found nude, battered, and bound in chains, curled up in the wheel well of her car. Her hands were tied, and she had 2 black eyes. It appeared that she had been either beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains had caused severe bruising on her back. To make matters worse, she had been given a lethal dose of morphine. The disappearance of her 2 children remained a mystery, however, with no signs of their whereabouts. Police were left searching for answers, with the children seemingly vanished into thin air. The police searched for hours, hoping to find Susan's children with a babysitter, but none of her regular sitters, friends, or family members had seen them that weekend. As a result, the police began investigating to find answers. To gather leads, the police published pictures of the Reinert family in newspapers for weeks. This was before the internet and Amber Alerts existed, making it more challenging to disseminate information quickly. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Susan Reinert had named William Bradfield, the man she believed she would marry, as the beneficiary of life insurance policies worth $730,000. This revelation raised suspicions that the children might have been killed to allow Bradfield to receive the substantial financial windfall. However, Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, during the weekend when Susan was killed and her children disappeared. Several other teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. The police then shifted their focus to Upper Marin High School, where Susan worked. The school was facing several difficulties and challenges. The principal, J.C. Smith, had been involved in a scandal. He had been fired the previous year, being arrested at a local shopping center, where a search of his Ford Granada revealed loaded handguns, a hooded mask, and various tools associated with burglary. Additionally, a syringe filled with morphine was found in his trunk. Jay's life was already unraveling before his wife's cancer diagnosis. In 1977, his wife was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, which she would eventually succumb to in August 1979. During her illness, she kept a diary, documenting her husband's increasingly bizarre behavior. Jay had begun engaging in consensual non-monogamous activities, including group sex and partner swapping, to which his wife strongly objected. This behavior seemed to be a precursor to even more alarming actions. Around the same time, their daughter, Stephanie, moved back in with her parents, bringing her husband Edward Hunsberger with her. The family was already dealing with the uncertainty of her mother's cancer battle, and tensions were running high among them. Edward Hunsberger and his wife Stephanie, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, struggled with heroin addiction and had trouble finding steady employment in the years leading up to their move. In an effort to escape their struggles with addiction, they moved back in with Jay family in early 1978. However, just a few months after the move, Stephanie and Edward mysteriously vanished. The last confirmed sighting of they was in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. Before leaving, they mentioned that they would return to visit soon. However, after this point, all contact with them ceased. Edward failed to appear at a scheduled meeting with his probation officer later that month, prompting authorities to begin searching for him and Stephanie. When investigators reached out to Jay for information, he claimed that they had left for California to escape debts owed to local drug dealers. Despite his assertions, Jay was unable to provide any further details about their disappearance. Edward and Stephanie had been constantly on the move, traveling from place to place and never staying in one location for too long, making it easy for them to disappear without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for theft, and a search of his home uncovered some disturbing items. Authorities found firearms, marijuana, prescription pills, security guard uniforms and badges, as well as disturbing pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and stolen office equipment from a local school. Jay was linked to a string of recent armed robberies matching his description and attire. While awaiting sentencing for the theft charge, Jay's alibi witness, Bradfield, testified that they were on vacation during the time of the robberies. However, the jury did not find Bradfield's testimony credible. Jay had a notorious reputation at Upper Merion, earning him the nickname, the Prince of Darkness. This was especially relevant in the investigation of Susan's death, which was caused by strangulation or suffocation. The time frame for her death was broad, and when questioned about his whereabouts, Jay couldn't provide a clear answer. The autopsy found that Susan's body had an extremely high amount of morphine, roughly 10 times the amount needed to be fatal, which indicates that her overdose was likely a deliberate act. As the investigation into Susan's death continued, Jay was found guilty of a series of store robberies in the late 1970s. He was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979. However, even behind bars, Jay remained a key suspect in the investigation into Susan's death. The police began to dig deeper into his past, uncovering a disturbing discovery. Jay's daughter and son-in-law had gone missing in similar circumstances to Susan and her children. There were two main connections between Jay and the disappearances. Firstly, large quantities of morphine had been discovered in Jay's house a few months earlier. Secondly, a plastic comb with Jay's military unit was found in Susan's car. The disappearances of Jay's daughter and son-in-law shared striking similarities with the disappearance of Susan's children. The investigation revealed a shocking series of events that had a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was discovered near Harrisburg, investigators stumbled upon a potential motive for the crime. In her official documents, Susan referred to Bradfield as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24. Bradfield and his colleagues arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and stayed until Monday afternoon, June 25. However, there was a gap in Bradfield's alibi, as his exact whereabouts during the time of Susan's disappearance were unclear. Investigations also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her accounts, totaling around $25,000. She had told bank employees that she planned to invest the money in high-yielding investments managed by Bradfield, whom she trusted as her future husband. Unbeknownst to Susan, Bradfield was leading a double life, dating multiple women, including a fellow English teacher, with whom he had a secret relationship spanning nearly a decade. Bradfield had promised Susan that he would handle her investments and assured her they would be profitable, providing a way for they to fund their upcoming wedding and move to England. However, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which were actually forgeries created by Bradfield. He had sold these worthless securities to Susan, using fictional companies to make them appear legitimate. This discovery added a new dimension to the narrative, revealing a significant financial motive. Bradfield was required to testify in a lawsuit in March 1980 but initially refused to answer questions, referring them to his lawyers instead. His lawyers denied any wrongdoing but were open to negotiating a settlement to resolve the matter and distribute Susan's estate, which was worth approximately $7 million. In June 1980, Bradfield testified in a civil trial, downplaying his involvement in the case. He contradicted Susan's claims about their relationship, saying it was not as serious as she had told others. He denied plans to marry Susan later that year, despite her having shared these plans with multiple people. Bradfield also made an unsubstantiated claim that Susan had an affair with Jay Smith, the former principal of her high school, but this accusation was not supported by any evidence. Friends and family members remembered Susan being in a long-term relationship with Bradfield, with no indication of a relationship with Jay Smith, who was actually in prison at the time of the trial. Bradfield failed to explain why Susan had named him the beneficiary of her $1 million estate. Instead, he portrayed Susan as an irresponsible person who frequently got into trouble, and he blamed her for her problems, claiming he was only trying to help her deal with the consequences. As the investigation into the missing $25,000 continued, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a second lawsuit in June 1980 to claim the $450,000 life insurance policy taken out on Susan's life just before her death. The goal was to use the funds to conduct a private investigation. However, the case took a surprising turn when Bradfield was arrested on February 20, 1981, and charged with 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy related to the $25,000. Wendy Ziegler, a former student of Bradfield's, was also charged as a co-conspirator in the case. Bradfield was released on bail on February 23, 1981, and was set to go on trial the following month. However, the trial was preempted when the original civil lawsuit was settled out of court. As a result of the settlement, $36,000 from Susan's estate was set aside to cover the costs of further investigations into the disappearance of the children and to contest certain provisions of Susan's will. Bradfield's 5-day trial ended on August 3, 1981, with a guilty verdict for theft. The prosecutor, Edward Weiss, requested that Bradfield's bond be increased from $25,000 to $75,000 due to concerns that the conviction would increase the risk of him fleeing, particularly in light of potential murder charges. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, Pennsylvania state troopers arrested Bradfield and charged him with multiple crimes, including 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and obstructing the law. A grand jury found evidence that Bradfield was aware of the plot to kill Susan and her children and had likely participated in these crimes. Although J.C. Smith, a suspected accomplice, was not charged at that time, a confession from a fellow inmate, Proctor Noel, implicated Bradfield. Noel stated that while playing chess with Bradfield in prison, Bradfield revealed his involvement in the murders. Despite the lack of direct physical evidence linking Bradfield to the crimes, prosecutors felt they had a strong case against him. A previous conviction for theft also bolstered their confidence, as did a potential connection to a person who may have disposed of the victims' bodies, which further implicated Bradfield in the murders that occurred in the 1980s. J.C. Smith was forced to testify before a grand jury in 1984, despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right. The questioning was likely related to the disappearance of his daughter, Stephanie, and her husband, Edward Huntsberger. Around the same time, William Bradfield was also called to testify, but the details of his statements were not made public. In April 1985, J.C. Smith was asked to provide handwriting samples that may have been linked to documents written years earlier, possibly outlining a plan to murder Susan Leinert. This led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan's body was found. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and taken into custody. While Jay awaited trial, a book about the case was published by crime author Joseph Wambaugh in 1984, suggesting that Smith was the killer. The book was later adapted into a TV miniseries, drawing national attention to the case. Despite this, Jay maintained his innocence from prison, filing appeals and claiming that William Bradfield had framed him. In 1989, the court decided to re-examine Jay's case and discovered problems with the prosecution's handling of the case. This led to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a thorough investigation. By 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning his murder conviction due to issues with the prosecution's conduct. For 20 years, the state did not pursue a new trial against J. C. Smith, allowing him to live the rest of his life without further prosecution. Meanwhile, William Bradfield continuously disregarded court orders and refused to pay the $25,000 he owed to the estate of Susan Reinert. This issue was finally resolved in a settlement in 1996. J. C. Smith went on to file lawsuits against the state and Joseph Wambaugh, claiming defamation and conspiracy. However, both suits were eventually dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, who had been in prison for over a decade, was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead due to cardiac arrest. Kenneth Reinert, the ex-husband of Susan Reinert, passed away in June 2002 without ever knowing what happened to their two missing children. J. C. Smith, whose conviction was overturned in 1992, wrote books about the case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009, leaving many questions about his involvement in the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Huntsberger, still unanswered. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lori Slasinski. Lori Slasinski, a 24-year-old former Auburn University student, disappeared mysteriously on June 10, 2006, from Auburn, Alabama. Her disappearance occurred after she had confirmed plans to attend a girls' night out at her best friend and co-worker's house home. However, she never arrived. Located in eastern Alabama, Auburn is a rapidly growing city with a rich cultural mix and a strong sense of Southern hospitality. It is home to Auburn University, one of the nation's most recognized public universities. Lori was born to parents Casey and Arlene Slasinski on September 21, 1981. She had blue eyes and blonde hair, and her parents and older brother, Paul, adored her. The investigation into Lori's disappearance began with a disturbing discovery. Her dog was left unattended, the air conditioner was still on, and the telephone cord was missing from her home. The police were baffled by the lack of evidence, and Lori's family was left with unanswered questions. Had Lori left town in a hurry, or was something more sinister at play? After 16 years, the mystery of Lori's disappearance was finally solved, but the events surrounding her vanishing remain as puzzling as ever. The family originally came from New York State but later relocated to rural Alabama farm country near Auburn when Lori was 13. Growing up in a country setting with animals, Lori developed a passion for animals. According to her friends, Lori was stunning and enjoyed spending time with friends, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. In addition to these leisure activities, she was diligent in her studies and received support from her family. After completing high school, Lori attended Auburn University, majoring in psychology with a minor in criminology. Her parents purchased a mobile home for her in a well-maintained house park popular with students, where she lived off campus with her cherished Yorkshire Terrier, Peanut. Lori maintained a close relationship with her family, and her mother would call her daily to check in. In 2005, Lori graduated with honors from Auburn University. Following graduation, she secured a job at the East Alabama Mental Health Center while still residing in the house park. She also made plans to pursue her master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her accomplishments, but they had no idea that something terrible was about to happen. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori planned a girls' night at her best friend Lindsey Braun's house. They intended to have a few drinks and watch a movie. Lori and Lindsey had met in their junior year at Auburn University and quickly became friends due to Lori's kind, charming, and outgoing personality. After graduating, they both worked at the same mental health facility, which strengthened their bond. At around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsey to say she needed to stop at the store before heading over for their movie night. Unfortunately, Lori never arrived. Lindsey became worried when she didn't hear from Lori again that night or the next day. She called Lori multiple times and left messages on her home answering machine, but Lori never responded. When Lori didn't show up to work on Monday, June 12th, Lindsey's concerns escalated. It was highly unusual for Lori to miss work without informing anyone. After Lori failed to show up to work on Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsey and another colleague visited Lori's home to check on her. When they arrived at the house, Lindsey found the door unlocked and the air conditioning on, which was unusual. Although Lori was nowhere to be found, her dog, Peanut, was in his crate, looking well-fed and content, as if someone had been caring for him. Surprisingly, his crate was clean, despite Lori having been missing for several days. Lindsey felt a sense of unease as she realized it was unusual for Lori to leave her beloved pet alone and unattended. She recalled that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor because the dog refused to walk on the tile. However, when Lindsey entered Lori's home later that day, the rugs were missing, along with the outside trash can. On the same day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a call from Lori's workplace, informing her that Lori had missed work for 2 consecutive days. Arlene immediately tried to contact Lori but was unable to reach her. Growing concerned for her daughter's well-being, Arlene left for Auburn after alerting her husband, Casey, about Lori's disappearance. Upon arriving at Lori's house, Arlene encountered a disturbing scene. The door was slightly ajar, and Lori's bed was perfectly made, but there was no sign of Lori. Her car was also missing. A closer inspection revealed that several items were gone, including the kitchen rugs, a pillow from the couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that usually held a rake and shovel, and the phone cord for the landline. Arlene's alarm grew as she realized that something was horribly wrong. She officially reported her daughter missing, holding on to the hope that Lori would eventually show up. As the initial investigation into Lori's disappearance began, police searched her house home but found no significant evidence linking to a suspect. However, they did notice signs of a struggle, scuff marks on the wall, and semen on her bedsheet. Additionally, traces of blood were discovered on the doorknob, and a coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also found at the scene. On June 10, 2006, police recovered surveillance footage showing Lori stopping at a Walmart in Alabama. This was the last known sighting of her, and no one had any idea what happened to her after that. Later that afternoon, Lori's mother, Arlene, received a phone call from one of Lori's friends, 25 years old Daryl Rick Ennis. Ennis claimed that he had met Lori on the day she went missing and thought she might have gone to make a drug deal. However, Arlene was skeptical of his story, despite knowing Ennis from when Lori invited him to spend Christmas with their family in 2005. Arlene couldn't believe that Lori would be involved in drug dealing and thought Ennis was lying, but she didn't know why he would make up such a story. Police received crucial information from Ennis himself. However, before they could investigate further, Lori's car was found engulfed in flames on a dead-end street near a bowling alley where Ennis used to work. This discovery, made on June 14, 2006, 4 days after Lori's disappearance, shifted the investigation from a missing persons case to a potential homicide. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed any potential evidence inside the car. Investigators found a hand-rolled cigarette near the vehicle and a gas can in the nearby woods, but Lori was not inside the car. Lori's family was devastated by the discovery, and they feared the worst. The only lead was the information Ennis had provided to Arlene. When questioned, Ennis repeated his story, adding more details. He claimed he and Lori grew marijuana together and speculated that she might have gone to sell her share. Ennis also suggested that Lori may have been involved with shady individuals. Police searched Lori's house thoroughly but found no evidence of her dealing drugs. During the investigation, they noticed scratches on Ennis's hands and arms, which he attributed to his dog. However, when they spoke to Lindsay, they uncovered more suspicious information. Lindsay reported that during her last phone conversation with Lori on the day she disappeared, she heard Rick Ennis speaking in the background. At the time, Lindsay didn't think much of it, as she knew Ennis was a friend of Lori's. Lindsay stated that when she asked Ennis about Lori's whereabouts via text, he replied that Lori was fine when he last saw her. Additionally, Lindsay told investigators that before Lori went missing, Lori mentioned that Ennis had written her a love letter, but Lori did not feel the same way. Lori had planned to talk to Ennis about her lack of romantic interest in him. Later, it was discovered that Ennis had told his friends about the love letter and Lori's rejection. When confronted with this new information, Ennis admitted to meeting Lori hours before her disappearance but claimed she was fine getting ready to go shopping when he left her house. However, investigators found inconsistencies in Ennis's statement, which raised suspicions. As a result, Rick Ennis became the prime suspect. The investigation led to a search of his car, where a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs were found. Investigators kept collecting evidence by looking into Ennis's past, but they were about to encounter some unexpected surprises. Looking into Rick Ennis's dark past, investigators found that at the age of 12, he had murdered his mother and stepfather. The incident occurred on March 3, 1993, in North Montgomery, Alabama, where the family resided in a house. Ennis's mother, known for her kind and church-going nature, was first shot in the face and then beaten to death with a baseball bat. His stepfather, Eddie Joe Flowers, nicknamed Elvis due to his resemblance to the musician, met a similar fate. Upon returning home from work, Eddie was shot in the face with a shotgun by Rick. Following the murders, Ennis took the family car and crashed it into a fence along the highway. Alabama State Trooper John Clark encountered Ennis walking along the highway and inquired about his parents' whereabouts. Ennis confessed to killing them. A search of his backpack revealed a kitchen knife and ammunition for a 12-gauge shotgun and a .22 caliber. When questioned about his motives, the 12-year-old Ennis showed no emotion and explained that he was upset about his parents' plan to move, which would require him to change schools. Investigators believe Ennis lived with the bodies for 2 days, during which time he continued to attend school. He also confessed to planning to kill his 3 stepsisters, which shocked investigators. However, because of his age, he was tried as a minor and sentenced to 9 years in jail for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori Slasinski. Following Lori's disappearance, Ennis was the primary suspect, but without direct evidence for Lori's body, he couldn't be charged. Ennis left Auburn shortly after speaking with detectives and eventually settled in Huntsville, Alabama, in 2007. By then, Lori's case had gone cold. In Huntsville, Ennis moved in with Abram Sissons, telling him that he had kitchen rugs given to him by a woman from Auburn who had vanished, but didn't mention her name. Abram didn't suspect anything out of the ordinary about his conversations with Ennis until he discovered Ennis's dark past. At that point, Abram asked Ennis to leave right away. Later, Abram reported that his apartment was completely trashed when he returned. However, police were able to recover the rugs, and one of them tested positive for Ennis's blood. Abram also mentioned that he had seen a Galileo thermometer in Ennis's room before Ennis moved in with him, the same type that was missing from Lori's home. Unfortunately, even with this new information, the police were still unable to connect Ennis to Lori's murder at that time. As their main suspect remained at large, the case went unsolved, leaving Lori's distraught family waiting for answers. Years went by with no updates on the case. Then, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, launched a cold case unit and reopened Lori's case. Alongside his team, including his longtime partner Agent J.W. Barnes, Lori's case was their top priority, and they began re-examining the evidence. They started sending evidence to forensic labs for testing and conducted multiple interviews. After re-examining the evidence, Ennis became the main suspect. Agent Mark suspected Ennis due to his past, but needed more evidence to prove his guilt. In a surprising turn of events, Agent Barnes discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing old files. He found an unopened report from 2006 containing test results from Lori's house. The results revealed Rick Ennis's DNA on Lori's bed sheet and the front door. With all the evidence compiled, investigators built a strong case against Ennis, leading to an indictment in 2018. At that time, Ennis was living in Pilot, Virginia, engaged to Elena Atkinson, and working for a company that built portable living structures called yurts. On August 6, 2018, Rick Ennis was arrested by U.S. Marshals on his 38th birthday, 12 years after Lori Slasinski's disappearance from Auburn. The arrest brought relief to Lori's family but shocked Ennis's fiancée and co-workers. Initially charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The trial started on April 1, 2022. The prosecution presented evidence linking Ennis to the crime, including a cigarette but with his DNA found in Lori's bed sheet. However, the defense suggested that the police might have taken the cigarette from Ennis's home and planted it at the crime scene to frame him. The defense also attempted to discredit Lori Slasinski by implying she was involved in drug dealing, which could explain how Ennis's DNA ended up on the bed sheet. Ennis claimed he had consensual sex with Lori before she disappeared, suggesting they were intimate despite Lori previously rejecting his advances. Nevertheless, his account lacked credibility, especially after 2 additional witnesses came forward with crucial information. One of his former co-workers in Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, stated that Ennis called him on June 9, 2006, the day before Lori's disappearance. Ennis asked Jeremy to bring him gas and let him keep the gas tank, but Jeremy refused. According to Jeremy, Ennis claimed he had run out of gas and needed help getting some. Later, after Lori's burned car was found, a gas can matching the description of one missing from Ennis's workplace, a bowling alley, was discovered. Another former co-worker, Terry Booth from South Carolina, shared a disturbing experience she had with Ennis years earlier. When asked why he moved from Auburn, Ennis told her he had to dispose of a body. Although Ennis's comment was initially thought to be a joke, his arrest for Lori's murder proved it was not. Despite denying the allegations and maintaining his innocence, Ennis was found guilty after a 2-day jury deliberation. He faced the death penalty, but prosecutors agreed to drop the death penalty after consulting with Lori's mother, Arlene. Arlene later stated that she agreed to a life sentence without parole for Rick Ennis to avoid years of potential appeals and ensure Ennis would never be released. Ennis was sentenced to life without parole on April 14, 2022, and is currently incarcerated at the William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. The outcome was bittersweet for Arlene Slasinski. Tearfully, she acknowledged that it meant she had to accept that Lori would never return home, a hope her heart had held on to. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Daniel Wozniak. Sam Herr was born to parents Stephen and Raquel Kalberman on May 29, 1983, in Los Angeles, California. As their only child, Sam Her was showered with love and attention from his parents, his father being a special education teacher and his mother a stay-at-home parent. Sam Her maintained a close relationship with his parents even after he moved away. Despite his physically imposing stature, Sam Her's friends affectionately referred to him as a gentle giant, describing him as a fun-loving and laid-back individual. Sam Her enlisted in the United States Army at a young age and completed tours of duty in Afghanistan and Germany as part of the 173rd Airborne. After serving for 3 years, he was honorably discharged and returned to Southern California to pursue higher education using the GI Bill. His goal was to complete college and then re-enlist in the Army as an officer. To achieve this, Sam enrolled in Orange Coast Community College, where he befriended Julie Kibushi, who was 3 years his junior. However, Sam Her struggled with the emotional aftermath of his military service, ultimately developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a common affliction among veterans. When 28-year-old Sam Her failed to visit his parents' house over a weekend as planned, they began to worry. Sam Her's parents, Stephen and Raquel, became increasingly concerned after several attempts to contact their son went unanswered. Deciding to take matters into their own hands, Stephen went to Sam Her's apartment in Costa Mesa with his wife to see what was amiss. Their discovery led to immediate panic when they could not find their son and only saw Julie Kibushi in a state of horror. Stephen quickly dialed 911 as Raquel choked and screamed. The moment they realized Julie had met a gruesome end, they knew their lives would never be the same, and the trauma would have a lasting impact. The Costa Mesa community was shocked by the incident, as murders are rare there. At the apartment, police found no signs of a disturbance. The bedroom, however, presented a disturbing scene. On the bedside table, investigators found an unused knife, as well as 2 books, a combat manual and a sex guide. But it was the condition of the bed that was truly horrifying. The bed was soaked in the Julie Kibushi's blood, and the deceased Julie Kibushi was found in a compromising position, partially lying on the bed and partially kneeling on the floor. Her pants had been pulled down, exposing her lower body, leading detectives to suspect that she may have been sexually assaulted before her murder. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head, with 1 bullet entering the top center of her skull. Although a knife was found on the bedside table, it appeared to have been unused. Other unusual details included a tiara on the victim's head and the words, "All yours," scrawled on the back of Julie Kibushi's sweater. Julie Kibushi handbag was found in the kitchen. The detectives identified the victim as 23-year-old Julie Kibushi, who was born on Valentine's Day in 1987 to a Japanese-American family. She was the first daughter and third of 4 children to parents June and Masa Kibushi. Her parents affectionately called her "my Valentine girl" from a young age. Julie Kibushi developed a passion for tap dancing at the age of 5, which continued to grow throughout her life. Those who knew her described her as a joyful person to be around, with a goofy and bubbly personality that could light up a room. Julie Kibushi was known for her kindness and willingness to go out of her way to help others. Julie Kibushi's life was a balance between her Japanese heritage and her independent American spirit. She had recently graduated from the Orange County School of the Arts and was pursuing a degree in fashion design at Orange Coast Community College. There, she befriended 26-year-old Sam Her and even tutored him in anthropology. Little did she know, her kindness would ultimately lead to her tragic demise. The police investigation into Julie Kibushi's murder was underway. Detectives meticulously examined the crime scene, searching for clues that would reveal the truth about her final moments. Their attention turned to Sam Her, as Julie Kibushi's body was found in his apartment. His sudden disappearance further raised suspicions. With evidence pointing to Sam Her's involvement, investigators decided to take a closer look at him. Detectives suspected that Sam Her had committed the crime in a moment of passion and then fled. This theory was supported by the fact that Sam Herr was nowhere to be found after the murder of Julie Kibushi in his apartment. The discovery of text messages from Sam Herr's number on Julie Kibushi's phone further fueled their suspicions. Initially, the messages seemed innocuous, with Sam Herr sending Julie Kibushi a text at 2:45 p.m. on May 21, 2010, telling her he would help a friend and then visit his parents. However, just 2 hours later, his messages took a drastic turn, as he frantically asked Julie Kibushi to come to his apartment. However, investigators interpreted these messages as evidence of Sam Herr's guilt, arguing that he had planned for Julie Kibushi to visit his apartment, which ultimately led to the murder. The disappearance of several key items from the apartment hinted at Sam Herr's possible flight. His passport and car were both missing, leading investigators to a straightforward conclusion: Sam Herr was on the run, and likely the prime suspect in the crime. As the investigation continued, the Costa Mesa police tracked Sam Herr's cell phone and credit card activity to pinpoint his location. They discovered that his credit card had been used for 4 ATM withdrawals and a purchase at a pizza delivery place in Long Beach, California, just 20 miles from Sam's home. Police anticipated that Sam Herr would appear in the surveillance footage of the ATM. However, when the bank provided the footage, the police were shocked to see a teenager wearing a hoodie, not Sam Herr, withdrawing money from his account. Neither the police nor Sam Herr's parents could identify the mysterious boy. Investigators believed he was probably helping Sam Herr escape or hide. In either case, the Costa Mesa police were determined to find him. On May 26, 2010, they discovered that his credit card had been used for another pizza delivery, and they began tracing the delivery driver. Police went to an address provided by a tipster, expecting to catch Sam Herr, but instead found 17-year-old Wesley Freilich and his friends. Although initially suspected, authorities quickly cleared Wesley's name. However, they discovered that he possessed Sam Herr's credit card. Wesley told investigators a surprising story. He had been given the credit card by Daniel Wozniak, a local theater actor who had met Wesley through community theater. Daniel Wozniak claimed to be a bail bondsman and said he needed help collecting money from Sam Herr. Believing Wozniak's story, Wesley agreed to withdraw cash using the credit card, unaware of the true circumstances. A total of $1,900 was withdrawn from the account, sparking further investigation. The name Daniel Wozniak was familiar to investigators, who had previously found an invitation to his upcoming wedding in Sam Herr's apartment. This raised several questions: who was Daniel Wozniak, and what was his connection to Sam Herr? Was he involved in helping Sam Herr escape, or was he a more sinister accomplice to the murder? These questions needed to be answered. To understand Daniel Wozniak's potential role, investigators looked into his background. Born on March 23, 1984, Daniel Wozniak was the youngest of 3 brothers. Due to his parents' demanding work schedules, he spent a significant amount of time with his grandparents after school. Daniel Wozniak grew up in a privileged household and was accustomed to luxury. Daniel Wozniak's journey to becoming an actor began in his early 20s. Despite struggling to hold down a job and often having to move to low-paying positions, his passion for acting and singing in musicals kept him going. It was during this time that he met his future wife, a fellow actress, and they eventually got married. However, their happiness was short-lived. On May 26, 2010, the day of Daniel Wozniak's bachelor party in Huntington Beach, California, police arrived with an arrest warrant. This unexpected turn of events linked Daniel Wozniak to the murder of Julie Kibushi, as it turned out that Sam Herr, the suspected killer, lived in the same apartment complex as Daniel Wozniak. Authorities believed that Daniel Wozniak may have helped Sam Herr escape or hide, leading them to assume he was involved in the crime. Police arrested and questioned Daniel Wozniak. Initially, during interrogation, Daniel Wozniak claimed that his only wrongdoing was credit card fraud and that he had covered for his friend Sam Herr. He explained to investigators that he, Sam Her, and Wesley had planned to withdraw all of his money from the bank and then report the credit cards as stolen. Daniel Wozniak claims he dropped Sam Her off at a local mall. Detectives remained skeptical, however, believing that Daniel Wozniak was still protecting Sam Her and had more to do with Julie Kibushi's murder than he had let on. In an effort to uncover the truth, police asked Wozniak to provide a DNA sample, a request that made him nervous. Detectives noticed Daniel Wozniak's nervous behavior when questioned about his DNA being found at Sam Her's apartment, despite his attempts to act nonchalant. As the pressure mounted, he began to alter his story repeatedly. Eventually, Daniel Wozniak cracked and admitted he knew about Julie Kibushi's murder and had helped the perpetrator escape. However, when reminded that his DNA had been collected, he insisted it would not match any evidence found on Julie Kibushi's body, clinging to the claim of his innocence. Just as detectives were expecting Daniel Wozniak to reveal more information, he abruptly ended the interview. The detectives, determined to uncover the truth, informed Daniel Wozniak that he would be arrested as an accessory to murder if he didn't provide a full account of his involvement. Daniel Wozniak, who was scheduled to get married in just 48 hours, was caught between revealing the truth and avoiding arrest, which would ruin his wedding plans. Under intense questioning, Daniel Wozniak's story began to unravel. Detectives sensed his weakness and accelerated the process by falsely claiming that DNA evidence linked him to Julie Kibushi's body. They misled him, as DNA test results would not be available for weeks. Instead of disputing the claim, Daniel Wozniak surprisingly explained that his DNA would be on Julie Kibushi's body because he was near her. This inconsistent response raised suspicions. As Daniel Wozniak's lies continued to crumble, he made a stunning revelation, which was particularly alarming to detectives because they had initially observed only one gunshot wound at the crime scene. It wasn't until the autopsy was performed that a second gunshot wound was discovered, casting further doubt on Daniel Wozniak's credibility. Daniel Wozniak's confession implicated him as an accomplice to the murder, allowing investigators to formally detain him. However, detectives still needed to locate Sam Her, and Daniel Wozniak refused to cooperate. Despite being in custody, Daniel Wozniak made a phone call to his fiancée, Rachel Buffett. Unbeknownst to Daniel Wozniak, the conversation was being recorded, which would eventually ensnare him in his own deceit. Rachel decided to prioritize her freedom over her relationship and informed Daniel Wozniak that she would share more information with the detectives. Realizing he needed to act swiftly, Daniel Wozniak became frantic and sought to negotiate a deal with the detectives, a reversal of his stance just hours earlier. Daniel Wozniak revealed a shocking account to the detectives, detailing his sinister murder plan. It began with a seemingly innocuous request to a friend, Sam Her, whom he considered trustworthy. On May 21, 2010, Daniel Wozniak asked Sam Her to help him move boxes at the Los Alamitos Theater attic, located on a local military base. Sam Her was initially unaware of what had happened. When he realized he had been shot, he begged Daniel Wozniak for help. However, Daniel Wozniak showed no mercy. Without hesitation, he reloaded the gun and shot Sam Her a second time, killing him instantly. The suspect brutally murdered Sam Her and didn't stop there. He then used Sam Her's phone to text Julie Kibushi, luring her to Sam Her's apartment. He left Sam Her's body in the attic later that night. The suspect snuck into Sam Her's apartment, where Julie Kibushi had fallen into his trap. He then shot Julie Kibushi twice in the head. Daniel Wozniak altered the crime scene to make people think Sam Her was the culprit, and he fled after attacking and killing Julie Kibushi. However, Daniel Wozniak realized that he still had to hide Sam Her's body. Daniel Wozniak went back to the attic and cut off Sam Her's hands and head to make it harder to identify the body. He then got rid of these body parts in a nearby park. Despite his gruesome actions, Daniel Wozniak appeared to be unaffected and returned to the theater, where he was seen laughing and joking with others in several photos taken at cast parties, which were later found by detectives. The underlying motive for the murders was surprisingly straightforward: money. Daniel Wozniak's financial struggles were well documented, with 2 months of unpaid rent threatening his eviction and no means to fund the lavish wedding and honeymoon he had planned. However, his situation changed dramatically when he discovered that Sam Herr had $62,000 in savings from his military service. This revelation sparked a sinister plan, and Daniel Wozniak brutally murdered 2 innocent people in cold blood, all to fund his own extravagant celebrations. The bag containing crucial evidence against Daniel Wozniak was meant to be disposed of by his brother Tim, but Tim threw it over their parents' fence instead. The bag held incriminating items like bloody clothing, a weapon, and victim Sam Herr's records and passport, all with Daniel's DNA. This treasure trove of evidence helped secure a quick conviction, with Daniel found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on December 16, 2015. On January 11, 2016, the jury in Daniel Wozniak's trial recommended the death penalty after only 1 hour of deliberation, a remarkably short time for such a serious decision. The judge later sentenced Daniel Wozniak to death on September 23, 2016. Years after the trial, detectives discovered that Rachel Buffett, Daniel Wozniak's former fiancée, had been aware of the murder plots and had misled investigators. Despite her denials, Rachel Buffett was arrested and charged with 3 felony counts of accessory after the fact for allegedly lying to the police on multiple occasions. On September 12, 2018, Rachel Buffett was found guilty of 2 serious charges, which carried a maximum sentence of 44 months in prison. As a result, she received a 32-month prison sentence on November 8, 2018. She was eventually released in 2019. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Harvey. Donald Harvey was born on April 15, 1952, in Hamilton, Ohio, to Ray and Goldie Donald. He was the oldest of 3 children and was affectionately known as Donnie by his parents. Following his birth, the family relocated to Boonville, Kentucky, a small community in the Appalachian Mountains. Despite struggling with poverty, they was loving and nurturing to their children. However, their marriage began to deteriorate due to their economic struggles. As a child, Donald was quiet and mostly kept to himself, showing no apparent signs of abnormality. However, he suffered a traumatic past, being sexually abused and assaulted by at least 3 men. The perpetrators included his uncle on his mother's side, who molested him during visits to his grandmother's home, and an older neighbor who offered him money for sexual favors. Additionally, at the age of 18, Donald claimed to have been sexually assaulted by his roommate, Randy White. While a traumatic past can contribute to the development of psychological issues, Donald was often perceived as a loner in school. He preferred to focus on his studies and rarely participated in extracurricular activities, opting to read instead. Although this helped him earn good grades, it also led to teasing and the label of teacher's pet. After graduating from Sturgeon Elementary School, Donald enrolled in Boonville High School in 1968. Despite his good academic record, he soon found himself bored with the daily routine and decided to drop out. However, he eventually earned his diploma through a correspondence school in Chicago and received his general education development at the age of 16. With no clear future plans, Donald struggled to figure out his life's direction. He eventually moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he landed a job at a local factory. However, when the factory closed down in 1970, Donald lost his job and was left uncertain about his future. Around that time, his mother called and asked him to visit his ailing grandfather, who was in Marymount Hospital in London, Kentucky. Donald agreed to the visit. During his daily visits to see his ailing grandfather, Donald formed strong relationships with the hospital workers, who grew to genuinely like him. Their admiration for him led to an unexpected job offer. Although it is unclear what motivated Donald to want to work as a nurse's aide, some speculate that he needed to earn a living after losing his previous job. Despite lacking formal training in nursing or medicine, the hospital staff entrusted him with responsibilities. Donald's job at the hospital involved caring for patients on his own, including tasks like changing bedpans, inserting catheters, and giving medications. Despite the challenges, Donald's early weeks at the hospital passed without incident. However, on the evening of May 31, 1970, Donald was attending to 88-year-old stroke patient Logan Evans in a private room. Suddenly, Evans rubbed his own feces on Donald's face. While it's likely Evans wasn't fully aware of his actions due to the effects of his stroke, the incident triggered something within Donald, leading him to completely lose control. Without realizing what he was doing, Donald suffocated Evans with a blue plastic bag and a pillow until the patient was motionless. He then checked Evans' pulse with a stethoscope to confirm his death. Following the killing, Donald disposed of the plastic bag, cleaned Evans' body, dressed him in a fresh gown, and showered him before notifying the nurses about the patient's passing. After the first incident, no one suspected anything out of the ordinary. Donald went to cover the patient with a sheet, but instead, he used his hand to smother him to death. It was surprising that he was able to do this without anyone noticing, especially since he used a pillow to kill him. The next day, Donald was assigned to care for another elderly patient, 69-year-old James Tyree. He made a critical mistake by using the wrong size catheter on him. When James realized what was happening, he yelled at Donald to remove it. Donald used his hand to restrain him, which caused him to vomit blood and eventually die from an air embolism. Once again, no one suspected foul play. With no one suspecting him of any wrongdoing after his first 2 murders, he became more confident and careless. Just 3 weeks after the first murder, Donald deliberately cut off the oxygen tank of 42-year-old patient Elizabeth Wyatt. He later claimed that he had ended her suffering, as she had expressed a desire to die. A nurse found Elizabeth dead 4 hours later, but no one questioned Donald about her death. Over the next 10 months, he took advantage of the lack of suspicion and killed 15 more patients under his care. He saw this as an opportunity to indulge his darker impulses, and he continued to kill without being detected. Donald's methods of murder varied widely, driven by a desire for pleasure or experimentation. He would often use smothering, sabotage oxygen tanks, inject lethal drugs, or overdose patients with medication. When angered, his methods became even more brutal. On one occasion, he inserted a coat hanger through a patient's catheter after an argument, puncturing the patient's bladder and bowel, which led to infection and death a few days later. Despite the brutality of his actions, Donald considered himself a mercy killer, the self-proclaimed angel of death who was playing God with vulnerable patients. He cloaked his horrific deeds in a mask of kindness, believing that his actions were somehow merciful. On March 31, 1971, the day he was arrested for burglary while drunk, Donald's life took a turn. In his incoherent confession, he revealed his dark secret to the police, but no one took him seriously. As a result, he faced only charges of petty theft and paid a fine instead of serving prison time. This close call prompted Donald to attempt to turn his life around. For a few months, he tried to regain stability and eventually landed a part-time job as a nurse's aide at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. In June 1973, Donald started a second nursing job at Good Samaritan Hospital in Lexington. He held both nursing positions simultaneously before eventually moving on. Between August 1974 and September 1975, he took on 2 non-nursing roles, a telephone operator in Lexington and a clerk at St. Luke's Hospital in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Notably, Donald was able to resist his urge to kill during this period. A possible explanation is that he had limited access to patients in these new roles, which may have also contributed to his decision to change jobs frequently. Donald's struggle to control his killing urges eventually became too much to manage, leading him to relocate to Cincinnati, Ohio in September 1975. He found employment at the Cincinnati VA Medical Hospital, working various roles including nursing assistant, housekeeping aide, and autopsy assistant. The hospital's night shift schedule and lack of supervision gave him unrestricted access to all areas of the hospital. Over the next decade, Donald murdered at least 15 patients while working at the hospital. He meticulously documented each crime in a diary, detailing the methods he used to kill his victims. These methods included poisoning patients' food and drinks, suffocating them with plastic bags and towels, and injecting them with lethal substances. Donald's experimentation with different methods was influenced by his study of medical journals, which he used to refine his techniques and avoid detection. Donald preferred cyanide as his method of murder, which he mixed into patients' food or administered through their gastric tubes. He accumulated a large stash of cyanide, approximately 30 pounds, which he stole from the hospital over time and kept at home for safekeeping. He stated that he began using morphine to kill patients in the 1970s, particularly in small hospitals in Kentucky where it was not heavily regulated. He also mentioned he used other methods, such as cyanide, arsenic, adhesive cleaner, and suffocation with a plastic bag. Despite the numerous deaths, he claimed to have avoided suspicion by making them appear accidental or due to natural causes. He revealed that in reality, he was a serial killer hiding in plain sight, preying on vulnerable patients. He took it upon himself to decide who lived or died, often without the patients' or their families' consent. He justified his actions as merciful, but he acknowledged that the truth was more complex. While he claimed that his crimes were motivated by compassion, other evidence suggested otherwise. He recounted that a turning point came in the early 1980s when his behavior became more erratic and driven by rage. He started dating a man named Doug Hill, but their relationship was tumultuous. After a heated argument, he poisoned Doug's ice cream with arsenic, and fortunately, Doug survived. This incident marked the first time he tried to harm someone outside of the hospital, revealing a darker side to his nature. Donald's behavior took a dark turn after a fight with Carl Heller. He moved in with Carl Heller, but the relationship quickly became toxic. Donald's jealousy and paranoia led him to suspect Heller of cheating, and he started lacing Carl's food with arsenic to keep her from leaving. As time passed, Donald's cruel actions extended beyond his home. He poisoned a female neighbor's drink with hepatitis serum during an argument, and she almost died before receiving treatment. Unfortunately, another neighbor, Helen Metzger, was not as fortunate. Donald poisoned one of her pies with arsenic, which ultimately led to her death. Donald's lack of consequences for his crimes emboldened him, and he became more confident and reckless. He felt like he was above the law, having gotten away with multiple murders. In April 1983, Donald's behavior escalated. After a disagreement with Heller's parents, he began secretly poisoning their food with small doses of arsenic. The following month, Carl's father, Henry, suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. During a visit, Donald saw an opportunity to strike again and laced Henry's pudding with arsenic. Henry died that night. Over the next year, Donald continued to target Carl's mother, Margaret, periodically poisoning her in an attempt to kill her. In January 1984, Donald's relationship with his partner, Carl, ended, and he was asked to leave their home. Donald reacted poorly to the breakup and spent the next 2 years trying to harm Carl using poison. He also attempted to kill one of Carl's female friends in a separate incident, but was unsuccessful. Although Donald did manage to hospitalize Carl at one point, his attempts to kill her ultimately failed. Donald's behavior raised suspicions on July 18, 1985, when security guards at his workplace discovered a suspicious collection of items in his gym bag. The contents included a gun, hypodermic needles, surgical scissors, gloves, a cocaine spoon, medical texts, occult books, and a biography of serial killer Charles Sobridge. As a result of the discovery, Donald was fined $50 for carrying a firearm on federal property and given the option to resign from his job quietly. Surprisingly, the incident was not documented in his work record, and the hospital did not investigate Donald for potential involvement in other crimes during his employment. He was able to secure a new job as a part-time nurse's aide at Drake Memorial Hospital in Cincinnati just 7 months later, in February 1986. Donald Harvey's new employers were impressed by his work and soon offered him a full-time position at the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, Donald had a dark past, and he quickly fell back into his old routine. Over the next 13 months, he murdered 26 more patients and attempted to kill several others by tampering with their life support machines, injecting them with lethal substances, and suffocating them. The murder spree finally came to an end on March 7, 1987, with the death of 44-year-old John Powell. Powell had been recovering from a motorcycle accident, but his sudden and mysterious death raised suspicions. Due to Ohio's law requiring an autopsy in cases of vehicular homicide, the authorities were able to investigate Powell's death. During the autopsy, the assistant coroner detected a faint scent of almonds, a sign of cyanide poisoning. This discovery led the authorities to launch an investigation into Powell's death. Initially, they suspected Powell's friends and family, but they found no evidence or motive. The focus then shifted to hospital employees who had access to Powell's room, and Donald Harvey was one of the individuals they needed to rule out. Hospital employees were voluntarily taking polygraph tests to clear their names. Donald Harvey also was offered to take a test, but he didn't follow through. Instead, he called in sick on the day of his scheduled test. He had even purchased a book on how to cheat on lie detector tests. This raised suspicions, especially when investigators discovered his notorious nickname, Angel of Death, and learned about his questionable partner from the hospital. As the investigation continued, authorities focused on Donald due to the unusual number of deaths surrounding him. During questioning, Donald initially denied any involvement in John Powell's murder, claiming he was just a victim of circumstance. However, after hours of interrogation, he eventually confessed to putting cyanide in Powell's feeding tube. He claimed he did it out of sympathy for Powell and his family, but denied responsibility for the other suspicious deaths. Donald was taken into custody, and investigators began searching for more evidence. On August 11, 1987, Donald, then 35, confessed to committing 33 murders over the past 17 years. As the investigation continued, the number of murders he confessed to grew to 70. Donald's claims of multiple murders raised suspicions among investigators, who questioned the accuracy of the numbers he provided. To verify his credibility, they ordered a series of psychiatric evaluations by multiple experts. The tests concluded that Donald was sane and competent, able to distinguish right from wrong and conform to the law. In 1987, Donald was sentenced to 8 life terms plus 20 years for the murders committed at Mary's Mount Hospital. The following year, he pleaded guilty to 3 additional murders and 3 attempted murders in Cincinnati, receiving 3 life sentences and 3 terms of 7 to 25 years. After a 2-year investigation, the remaining cases were closed due to insufficient evidence linking Donald to the crimes. The public was both shocked by Donald's actions, and many wondered what drove him to commit such heinous crimes. In a 1991 interview with the Columbus Dispatch, Donald revealed that his motivation stemmed from a desire for control. He felt that others had controlled him for 18 years, and he sought to reclaim power over his own life. Donald admitted that he enjoyed the sense of power that came with deciding who lived or died. Donald Harvey is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history, not only due to the high number of victims but also because he targeted people he knew personally, including his patients. An Associated Press article from 2001 listed him as the worst serial killer in the United States. Contrary to expectations that Donald would spend the rest of his life in prison and die of natural causes, his life took a different turn. On March 28, 2017, Donald was found severely beaten in his cell at the Toledo Correctional Institution, where he was being held in protective custody. He died 2 days later from severe head injuries. Months later, an inmate named James Elliott confessed to the crime in a letter to the Toledo Blade. James, who was serving a 37-year sentence for multiple burglaries, claimed that he had committed the murder to bring closure to the families of Donald's victims, who were from his hometown in Kentucky. In his letter, James wrote that he hoped his actions would bring some solace to the victims' families, as Donald had not received the punishment he deserved from the courts. In September 2019, James was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to the murder of the notorious Angel of Death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20, 1986 in Upland, California. Michelle was the eldest daughter of her parents, who were business owners. She grew up with a sister who's 3 years younger than her. Michelle was raised in a strict conservative home and shared a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, she had a pretty normal life. During her time at school and college, her friends knew her as a polite and kind person. Michelle was known for speaking her mind and addressing conflicts directly. Since childhood, she had been diligent in completing tasks, a trait that continued throughout her high school years. In high school, Michelle was in a long-term relationship with a single person whose identity remains unknown. The relationship led to marriage in 2008, but 4 years later, the marriage began to unravel. They decided to separate, which left Michelle heartbroken and questioning her ability to find love again. However, in 2013, she met Ian Diaz, a man she met through a dating site. Ian, who was working as a deputy U.S. Marshal at the time, was attentive and loving, drawing Michelle in. They eventually moved in together in the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they set a wedding date. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect, but over time, Ian's behavior changed dramatically. Michelle had always seen Ian as a kind and attentive partner, but he slowly became loathing and abusive. At first, Michelle struggled to recognize these changes, mistaking them for acts of love. Ian began making requests that made Michelle uncomfortable, such as asking her to wear more revealing clothes. Despite her conservative upbringing, Michelle complied with his demands. Too easily, Ian made increasingly provocative demands. He asked her to get her navel pierced, and she finally agreed. Ian's requests became more bizarre and controlling. He asked Michelle to quit her job at a marketing firm, which she loved, and take a job at Disneyland, a place he had worked at before becoming a deputy U.S. Marshal. Ian claimed he wanted Michelle to be in a safer environment, but in reality, he wanted to keep a close eye on her every move, using his connections at Disneyland to monitor her activities. Michelle was initially taken aback by her husband's unusual request, but she wanted to make him happy, so she agreed to go along with it. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the situation and realized she was changing into someone she wasn't. She thought about discussing her concerns with her husband, but when she tried to talk to him, he became defensive and abusive. Around this time, Michelle and her husband, Ian, decided to buy a condo together. They thought owning a place would strengthen their relationship. This was about 2 years after they met in 2015. After searching, they found a condo in downtown Anaheim that they loved, but it was a bit pricey at $470,000. Although it was a stretch for their budget, they wanted the condo. What Michelle didn't know at the time was that Ian had no intention of contributing to the mortgage payments. Michelle and Ian had been experiencing relationship problems, but things took a turn for the worse when they bought a condo together. Ian claimed he was having financial difficulties and couldn't contribute to the down payment, which was $144,000 in cash. Michelle paid the entire amount and also made the mortgage payments, despite both their names being on the deed. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, and one incident turned violent, with Ian raising his hand to Michelle, causing her slight injuries. She drafted an email to her sister about the abuse but never sent it. By the summer of 2015, Michelle decided to leave the condo and move in with her parents. However, she was still responsible for paying the mortgage, which Ian continued to neglect. This enraged Michelle, especially since she had left her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland for less pay. When Michelle tried to contact Ian about the missed mortgage payments, he ignored her emails, calls, and texts. This lack of response pushed Michelle to her limit, and she decided to confront Ian directly. Ian revealed that he had no intention of paying the mortgage on the condo he shared with Michelle. This admission enraged Michelle, who was already struggling with the situation. She sent Ian a strongly worded email, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences. Ian responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle, but the police did not fully support his claim, as he was also at fault. When Michelle discovered Ian's restraining order request, she countered with evidence that he had never paid the mortgage on their jointly owned condo. They eventually agreed to hire property lawyers to resolve the issue. The court ultimately ruled in Michelle's favor, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance and imposing an additional penalty if he failed to comply. Ian was upset by the judgment but was forced to abide by the court's decision. The dispute took a year to resolve, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had separated for good. Michelle was finally free from the toxic relationship, while Ian was left. He was still living in the condo and paying the mortgage, which had taken a significant toll on him. In an effort to move on, Ian started using dating apps again, which is how he met Angela Connell. Although little is known about Angela, it is known that she was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona, attended a Catholic high school, and graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016, and their connection was immediate. Within a month, Ian proposed, and Angela moved into his condo. Everything seemed perfect for they. By May 2016, Angela was pregnant with twins, and Ian was overjoyed. However, their happiness was short-lived. Angela received an anonymous email that read, "You're not the right person for Ian." The message shook Angela, and she couldn't help but think of her ex, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before meeting Ian. But there was one problem: Angela had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so it seemed impossible for him to know about her new relationship with Ian. The email's origin and intentions remained a mystery. Ian and Angela were still living in the condo that Michelle had purchased. One day, Ian brought up the topic of the condo in a conversation with Angela, and she suddenly realized that Michelle might be the one who had sent her an anonymous email. Shortly after, Angela started receiving more emails from 6 different accounts, all with the same message but worded differently. Curious about the sender's identity, Angela replied to one of the emails and asked who was behind them. To her surprise, the response claimed to be from Michelle. Angela told Michelle to stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The next few emails Angela received made her feel threatened and worried for her safety. Fearing for her life, Angela decided to take action and filed a restraining order against Michelle on June 1, 2016. In her statement to the police, Angela explained that Michelle's emails had filled her with fear and anxiety. She was afraid to leave her home because of the threats and was worried that she might be attacked and killed if she stepped outside. The court took Angela's concerns seriously and immediately granted the restraining order against Michelle. In June 2016, Michelle appeared to have moved on from her past relationship. One evening, she met a friend and was returning home when she was met by a team of police officers in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding the restraining order. During the interrogation, Michelle was questioned about her connection to Angela and the threatening emails sent from her email address. Michelle claimed she had never heard of Angela and was unaware of the emails. She also stated that she believed she was being set up, as she had recently received alerts from Google and Microsoft indicating that her email address had been compromised. Specifically, her email address had been shut down, and she had been notified that it was being used as a recovery email for multiple unknown email accounts. Michelle suspected that her ex-husband might be impersonating her and had reported her concerns to the Anaheim Police Department. However, the police officers did not take her claims seriously. Despite Michelle's denials, she was served with a restraining order. Unbeknownst to Michelle, this was only the beginning of a more complex situation. Shortly after, Angela started receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she had not posted. The ad contained details soliciting a sexual coercion fantasy, which shocked Angela. She realized that someone must have created an account in her name, as the emails contained her exact personal details, including her phone number, condo address, and the breed of her dog. The only people who knew her condo's exact address were Ian and Michelle. Angela's fear resurfaced as she pondered the idea that the Craigslist ad might not have been Ian's doing. She became terrified, unwilling to leave her house, knowing that the perpetrator was aware of her address. The feeling of being constantly watched and not knowing who was responsible made her extremely uneasy. Days after the incident, on June 24, 2016, Angela was attacked. She was left with a bruised neck, ripped clothes, and a head injury from being slammed against the wall. Despite her condition, Angela managed to call 911. When the police asked if she recognized her attacker, Angela identified the person as Michelle. The police decided to take a stronger approach with Michelle and arrested her, as they believed a restraining order was not enough to prevent her from harming Angela. While in jail, Michelle managed to inform her parents about her arrest. Her parents, who were from a conservative background and were successful business owners, took immediate action to handle the situation. Michelle's bail was set at $10,000, which her parents were able to pay, securing her release. After Michelle's release, Angela began receiving harassing emails again. Although it seemed unlikely, the emails were actually sent from Michelle's personal email address. This raised questions about Michelle's involvement in the harassment. In another incident on July 13th, Angela contacted 911 after seeing a man standing outside her condo. When the police arrived, the stranger claimed to be responding to a sexually explicit Craigslist ad posted in Angela's name. The police investigated the origin of the ad and found that it led back to Michelle. This discovery raised more questions. Was Michelle lying to the police, or was someone else using her name to post the ad? The day after Michelle's second arrest on July 14th, the police set her bail at a staggering $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the threatening emails and creating the Craigslist ads, and her parents believed her, knowing she wasn't capable of such behavior. They decided to hire a lawyer, suspecting that whoever was behind the threats could continue to have Michelle arrested. During Michelle's second stint in jail, the threats and emails targeting Angela stopped again. 3 months passed, and it seemed like the situation had finally calmed down for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were working tirelessly to uncover the identity of the person impersonating their daughter. To get to the bottom of the mystery, they needed to find out who had access to Michelle's records. After gathering data from her school, hospital, and other records, they discovered crucial evidence. It turned out that Michelle had been hospitalized in June, on the same day the first emails were sent. This revelation made it clear that Michelle couldn't have sent those emails herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received information that led them to believe their daughter was innocent. Michelle's father took matters into his own hands and downloaded software to track the IP addresses of the threatening emails, which were encrypted and difficult to trace. On September 30, 2016, Ian appeared at the police station and presented the bail, securing Michelle's release. Michelle and her family were shocked and confused by Ian's actions, and they couldn't understand why he would bail her out after treating her poorly in the past. They wondered if Ian had suddenly developed a conscience or if there was more to the story. After Michelle's release, Ian revealed a shocking truth. He claimed that Angela had framed Michelle for sending the threatening emails. According to Ian, Angela had created proxy email addresses in Michelle's name and used them to send threatening emails to herself. This revelation raised more questions than answers, and Michelle and her family were left to wonder why Angela would do such a thing. Angela went so far as to post Craigslist ads pretending to be Michelle. These ads included personal details that only Ian and Angela would know. Further, Angela inflicted bruises on herself in June 2016, claiming someone had attacked her in her garage. However, Ian later found CCTV footage revealing the truth: Angela had self-inflicted the injuries. Ian discovered a history of Angela fabricating stories and making things up from the start of their relationship. Angela's deceit went so far as faking her pregnancy. She had even purchased a sonogram photo and positive pregnancy test. Ian investigated further to determine the root cause of Angela's obsessive and hurtful actions against Michelle. Angela became aware of Michelle after meeting Ian in 2015, where Michelle and Ian came up frequently. As a result, Angela developed curiosity and eventually resentment toward Michelle after looking into Michelle's personal background, including the affluent community from which she hailed. Angela's discovery led her to view Michelle as a lucrative target. Meanwhile, Ian, Michelle's husband, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Michelle due to a past condo dispute. The incident had left Ian fuming, particularly because he was forced to pay the mortgage after Michelle's countersuit. Seeking revenge, Ian and Angela formed an alliance to bring Michelle down. Ian provided Angela with Michelle's email address, and they began secretly plotting to frame Michelle and have her arrested. To conceal their scheme, they created multiple email addresses to communicate with each other. Using virtual private networks, VPNs, they created 6 fake accounts in Michelle's name. Unbeknownst to Michelle, these accounts were the source of the Google alerts she had reported to the police, which were actually created by Angela. When Michelle obtained a restraining order, Angela was dissatisfied, as her goal was to completely eliminate Michelle. In response, Angela devised a more elaborate plan. She created a fake Craigslist profile using Michelle's identity and posted an ad inviting men to her home for a sexual coercion fantasy. However, the inconsistencies in their plan ultimately led Ian to confess, inadvertently framing his own wife in the process. He was seemingly oblivious to the extent Angela would go far once the truth was out. The police obtained a search warrant for all of Angela's devices, and what they found was astonishing. The investigation revealed that all of Ian's claims were true. They discovered 21 threatening emails, most of which were sent from Angela and Ian's condo. Further investigation into the origins of the emails supposedly sent to Angela revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was discovered that Angela had traveled to Arizona to visit her father during that time. The investigation into Angela's background began after these shocking discoveries. It was then that investigators found out that this was not the first time Angela had committed such an act. In 2013, Angela had committed similar crimes while dating Jason Rayburn, a state trooper from California. During their relationship, Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had been diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, as time passed, Jason became suspicious as Angela's claims did not add up. He started digging deeper and was shocked to discover that Angela had fabricated both her cancer diagnosis and her career. On January 6, 2019, nearly 3 years after the truth came to light, Angela was arrested and charged for her crimes. The Orange County District Attorney's Office worked to clear Michelle's name, and 3 days later, her record was officially cleared of the false charges of making a threat to life and assault. As a result of the ordeal, Michelle had to drop out of her MBA program and lost her job. However, now that her name has been cleared, she is rebuilding her life. She has since completed her MBA and found a job in field marketing for a cosmetics company. Michelle has also moved to New York to start fresh and be closer to her sister. In contrast, Angela pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including false imprisonment and perjury, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Ian, who was involved with Angela, has since separated from her and sold their condo for $500,000. In 2021, Ian faced multiple charges for allegedly masterminding a plot to frame Michelle. In addition to receiving a 5-year prison sentence, he was charged with 1 count each of perjury, cyberstalking, and conspiracy to commit cyberstalking. This raises questions about the thoroughness of the initial investigation. If the investigators and police officers had scrutinized the situation more closely, perhaps the plot would not have progressed as far as it did. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Leanne Tiernan. Leanne Tiernan was born on September 27, 1984, to Michael Tiernan and Sharon Hawkhead in Bramley. Although her parents divorced shortly after her birth, Leanne remained close to her father. She and her older sister, Michelle, lived with their mother in Leeds, but their father continued to play an active role in their lives. Leanne was also very fond of her grandparents and would often accompany them to church on Sunday mornings. She had a sweet tooth and was affectionately nicknamed Chocolate Chip Niece by an uncle. Leanne was a student at West Leeds High School. She had been diligently studying for her GCSEs. A day out with her best friend, 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse, was a fun holiday. They planned to go to Leeds for some early Christmas shopping. On Sunday, November 26, 2000, after going to church with her grandmother, Leanne returned home to prepare for an outing with Sarah. She wears a black and white ribbed turtleneck sweater, black pants, and black ankle boots over a blue jacket. She styled her hair in her favorite French style, kissed her mother, and set off to meet Sarah. Leanne and Sarah took a bus to downtown Leeds and spent the afternoon shopping. By late afternoon, they finished their work and boarded the bus back to Bramley. At about 4:50 p.m., they got out of the car and walked to Sarah's house and parted ways. Sarah watched Leanne walk towards Howley Gill, a public footpath that was a shortcut to her house. Even though the path was unlit and went through a wooded area, Leanne felt safe walking because it was still light out. It should have only taken Leanne 20 minutes to get home, but when Sarah called Leanne's house at 5:20 p.m. to chat, she was surprised to hear that Leanne hadn't come home yet. Sharon kept calling Leanne's mobile phone, but she did not answer. At 7 p.m., Sharon reported Leanne missing to the local police station. West Yorkshire Police, led by Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg, launched a large-scale search operation. The terrain is challenging, with more than 700 homes, vacant lots, woods, canals, drainage shafts, and wells to search. The police are determined to find Leanne and bring her home safely. They used helicopters, uniformed police, and search dogs to scour the area, going from house to house. To preserve any potential evidence, trash collection in the area has been suspended. A week later, despite their best efforts, there was still no sign of Leanne. Investigators reconstructed her final activities with the help of her sister Michelle and close friend Sarah. As the investigation unfolded, several witnesses came forward claiming to have seen a suspicious man walking his black and tan dog in the Howley-Gill area just an hour before Leanne got off the bus on her way home. The police created a composite sketch of the man, describing him as 5 feet 8 inches with a stocky build, round face, and possible scarring. He was seen wearing a black beanie, a long waterproof coat and dirty jeans. Police have released this information to the public. As the investigation stalled, the case began to go cold. However, the public continues to show support for Leanne's family, doing everything they can to make her story known. Dad of 3 from Leeds, Sean Clark, even offered a £10,000 reward for any information that could lead to Leanne's safe return. Additionally, Iceland Foods, a supermarket chain, printed Leanne's picture and details on their milk cartons nationwide. As the months passed, investigators searched more than 2,000 homes and outbuildings along Leanne's route home from the shopping district. The police still haven't found Leanne. Her loved ones always hoped that one day she would return home. But 9 months after her disappearance, on August 20, 2001, a man named Mark Bisson was walking his dog in Lindley Woods, a forest near North Yorkshire, when he stumbled upon a mysterious discovery. Initially, it appeared to be a pile of rubbish, but as he looked closer, he discovered a floral duvet wrapped in twine. When removing the rope, Bisson found a body wrapped in 9 large garbage bags. The police were called, and they carefully removed the blanket and bag to reveal the body of a fully clothed young girl. The body was found with its hands bound behind its back with 3 yellow cable ties, and a leather dog collar was tightly secured around its neck. Underneath the black garbage bag covering its head, investigators discovered the decomposing face of a young woman. Using fingerprints, they were able to identify the body as Leanne Tiernan. An autopsy later confirmed that Leanne had been strangled to death with a plastic cable tie. The investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry. Authorities believe the killer was likely a local resident. 2 key pieces of evidence support this theory. Leanne's body was found just 16 miles from where she was last seen, and the yellow cable used to bind her hands is commonly used by the British postal system, especially Royal Mail or Parcel Force. The green garbage bags used to wrap Leanne's body were identified as coming from Morrison's, a popular grocery store chain with 2 locations in the area. Investigators collected DNA samples from Leanne's family members, friends, and known sex offenders in the area, hoping to find a match. In addition, a thorough search of the bushland area where Leanne's body was buried was conducted. The investigation into Leanne's death was ongoing, but one thing puzzled detectives: her body was found in an area that had been thoroughly searched before, and it didn't show the usual signs of decomposition after 9 months. Her hair was still styled in the same ponytail with the same hair tie and clip she had when she went missing. The medical examiner's analysis of her cardiac tissue revealed that Leanne was killed on the day she was kidnapped, and her body was stored in a cold environment for months. The killer attempted to dispose of her body by leaving it in a common dump area, wrapped in a duvet, a few weeks before it was discovered. Although the killer tried to hide the body, he accidentally saved a significant amount of forensic evidence and DNA. However, when authorities analyzed the body, they were disappointed to find no DNA evidence of the killer. They then turned their attention to investigating the items found with Leanne's body, hoping to find clues that will help them catch the killer. The investigation found dog hair on Leanne's clothes, leading police to attempt to create a DNA profile of the dog in the hope of identifying the killer. The dog hair was sent to a Texas university that specializes in DNA profiling of purebred pets. Although the university was able to obtain a partial DNA profile, they were unable to match it to a specific dog, so analysis was stopped. A knitted scarf was found around Leanne's neck containing knotted human hair. The hair was submitted for DNA testing, and a DNA profile was successfully created from the small amount of DNA found inside the hair shaft. The police then turned their attention to the dog collar that had been used to wrap a black bin liner around Leanne's neck. The collar was found to have been manufactured by a company called Armitage Leather Products, based in Nottingham. Detectives hoped that if the killer had purchased the dog collar from them, they might be able to obtain his name or address. The police reached out to the manufacturer and requested sales records. After analyzing these documents, investigators contacted more than 220 wholesalers across the UK. Their 112th inquiry proved successful. They contacted a company called Pet Pajamas, based in Liverpool, which revealed that it had sold 3 of the distinctive dog collars in question. Pet Pajamas provided investigators with details of the 3 customers who had bought these items. The detectives started investigating the customers and soon identified a prime suspect, John Taylor from Bramley, near the area where Leanne was last seen. Taylor's name had previously come up during the investigation when Leanne's body was found. At the time, witnesses reported that Taylor was frequently seen in the woods with his dog. By the time investigators prepared to question Taylor, he had already stated that his dog had passed away before Leanne's murder, sparking suspicion that he may have deliberately killed his pet to conceal evidence. At first glance, John Taylor seemed like a regular person. He was a 45-year-old man working as a delivery driver for Parcel Force, a division of the Royal Mail. He had no serious criminal history except for one instance when he stole a suit as a 15-year-old. He was previously married, with the couple having 2 children, a son in 1981 and a daughter in 1983, before they got a divorce in 1996. He appeared to be living a solitary and unassuming life in a modest house on Cockshot Drive, Bramley, Leeds. Taylor's neighbors consider him a normal person, but he enjoys causing pain to animals. He would hunt and torture rabbits, stab foxes, and bludgeon pheasants to death. In 1982, Taylor started breeding dogs and ferrets at his home on Cockshot Drive, which led to a buildup of animal waste. The smell eventually became unbearable for his wife, Janet, who had always taken pride in their home. Janet could no longer tolerate the situation and filed for divorce. Taylor frequently traveled around the country, not for work but to meet women he had contacted online. He often uses the internet to find female friends online and often has sex with them. Investigators later tracked down some of these women through Taylor's phone records and interviewed them. While most described him as harmless, some admitted to having called the police to report him as a suspect after the discovery of Leanne's body. 2 women, in particular, described Taylor as someone who enjoyed violence during intimate encounters. He even told one woman that he had a desire to have sex with her daughter. A former girlfriend of Taylor's ended their relationship due to his fascination with bondage. She reported that Taylor would restrain her hands with cable ties and cover her face with scarves. When questioned by investigators, she described Taylor's method of restraint, which involved using a bundle of cable ties stored in his bedside drawer. He would bind her wrists with 2 cable ties and then connect them behind her back with a 3rd tie. This technique was eerily similar to the way Leanne's body was found, and the details had not been publicly disclosed. 10 months after Leanne's disappearance, Taylor was arrested and brought in for questioning. A warrant was issued for his DNA and a search of his property. The police immediately cordoned off his house on Cockshot Drive and conducted a thorough search of the premises. In the backyard, they discovered a hedge plant, a plum tree, and a poplar tree. Pollen from these plants was found on Leanne's hair, skin, and nasal tract, indicating that she had been at the location before her death. During the search, police excavated the garden and found the remains of various animals, including 28 ferrets buried in a mass grave and the skeletons of 4 dogs. One of the dogs, a tan and black terrier, had a crushed skull. It is possible that Taylor killed his dog to conceal his identity after learning that the police were looking for a suspect with a dog. Forensic tests revealed that the hairs found on Leanne's body matched those of the tan and black terrier. Investigators gathered crucial evidence linking Taylor to Leanne's murder inside the house. A closer examination of the floorboards revealed paint carpet fibers caught on nails, which matched the fibers found on Leanne's body. Additionally, a blood stain belonging to Leanne was discovered under the floorboards. The twine used to tie the bin liners around Leanne's body was identified as part of a unique batch produced by a manufacturer in Devon, specifically designed for making rabbit-catching nets. A matching batch was found in Taylor's home. Further investigation revealed a stash of yellow zip ties in Taylor's house, which were manufactured by an Italian company exclusively for the Royal Mail. As Taylor worked for Parcel Force, a division of Royal Mail, it was easy for him to obtain these ties. A nail in John's kitchen had the same type of garbage bag wrapped around it, adding to the evidence. 3 large freezers were also found on the property, although their significance was not immediately clear. Initially, Taylor denied knowing Leanne or being involved in her murder. However, when giving evidence, Taylor admitted to kidnapping Leanne but insisted her death was an accident. He claimed that Leanne died from a fall that hit her head. According to investigators, Leanne's death did not occur as a result of a fall, as claimed by Taylor. In reality, Taylor attacked Leanne from behind while she was walking alone on the unlit path of Holly Gill. There were no eyewitnesses, but a stifled scream was reported. Investigators concluded that Taylor then strangled Leanne and bound her hands with cable ties, resulting in her death. In 2002, John Taylor, 46, was found guilty of murdering and kidnapping Leanne. He received 2 life sentences and will be eligible for parole after 20 years. After his conviction, investigators discovered that Taylor had committed previous crimes. Once his DNA was added to the police database, they matched him to 2 old assault cases. One assault occurred on October 18, 1988. A 32-year-old woman was attacked while walking to pick up her kids from school on Holly Gill. Taylor was masked and carried a knife. Another attack happened on March 1, 1989, when Taylor entered a Bramley house through force, masked and with a knife. He dragged a 21-year-old mother into her bedroom and attacked her. He also stripped, blindfolded, and gagged her, while her 18-month-old daughter cried in the next room. The investigation into Leanne's murder showed a clear calculation in the disposal of her body. After her murder, Taylor kept her body in his kitchen freezer. In the years following Leanne's case, police conducted a nationwide review of similar cold cases. In 2018, the full extent of John Taylor's heinous crimes came to light when he confessed to a series of vile acts committed against 5 women between 1977 and 1996. One of these incidents involved holding a knife to the throat of a pregnant woman and forcing her to perform a degrading act. Another incident occurred in 1977, just before Christmas, when he assaulted a barmaid. Taylor pleaded guilty to these attacks and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at Wakefield Prison, a maximum security facility notorious for housing infamous and violent offenders. Many questions remain about the extent of Taylor's crimes, including how many more murders and assaults he may have committed and how far back his crimes date. It is also unclear how he managed to evade capture for so long. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Julie Minogue. Julie Minogue was born on July 19, 1982, in Goshen, New York, a charming town where she was raised by her loving parents, Gerald Minogue and Sandra Barish Doper. She grew up with a sister, Allison Barati Corcoran, and a brother, Peter Gerald Minogue. Throughout her school years, Julie excelled academically at Monroe Woodbury schools, ultimately graduating from Monroe Woodbury High School. She continued her education at Orange County Community College, expanding her knowledge and embracing new experiences. After completing her education, Julie Minogue became a dedicated medical assistant at Coastal Obstetrics and Gynecology in Connecticut. Julie prioritized an active lifestyle, enjoying running and walking to stay energized. She had 2 sons, Nicholas Keith Turner and Sean Michael Turner. Although the details about her marriage and husband are unknown, she has a strong bond between her and her sons. Julie Minogue found love again in 2017 with Ewan Anthony DeWitt from Roxbury. Together, they welcomed a son, Luke Anthony Minogue, in 2019. However, their relationship eventually fell apart, causing them to divorce. In 2021, she moved into an apartment on Salem Walk in Milford with her sons, putting their happiness first. By 2022, Julie's eldest son, Nicholas, was 21 and had bravely served in the Coast Guard. Her middle son, Sean, was a 17-year-old high school senior. Luke, her youngest son with Ewan, was 3 years old and brought joy to their household. Julie was 40, and life seemed to be going well for her and her 3 boys. However, tragedy struck her family. On the night of December 6, 2022, 17-year-old Sean Minogue was awoken by terrifying screams. At first, he thought the noise was an echo from the neighbor's house, but the crying became louder. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Sean rushed downstairs, concerned for his mother's safety. As he descended into the darkness, he caught a man wielding an axe, and his mother lying on the floor, covered in blood. Amidst the chaos, Sean heard the haunting words, "You didn't believe me," echoing in his mind. Sean quickly ran upstairs, locked his door, and called 911 to report the incident. He placed a chair behind the locked door and opened his window to seek help. Shortly after, he could hear the sound of sirens and people approaching. When he heard the police voice, he mistakenly thought there was an intruder, so he jumped out the window. The officers found the frightened teenager and ensured his safety. Meanwhile, police officers entered the kitchen and discovered Julie Minogue lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Her face and skull had severe cuts. A large axe was found on the stove, indicating the severity of the crime. In the living room, Julie's 3-year-old son Luke was found sitting on the couch, seemingly in shock. He was unresponsive, neither crying nor speaking. An officer stayed with Luke and provided comfort until more police officers arrived at the scene. Following Julie's tragic death, her body was taken to the medical examiner's office for a thorough examination. After a meticulous autopsy, the medical examiner determined that the cause of her death was the severe chopped wounds and impact injuries to her head, torso, and extremities. The detailed findings have provided vital evidence about the attack and the cause of her death. As the police took custody of the evidence they found on the gas stove, they conducted a thorough search of the area to look for any potential evidence that could lead them to the perpetrator. They searched every inch of the house, examining each room for any clues that could shed light on the crime. The investigation attracted the attention of concerned neighbors, who gathered nearby. They was eager to support the investigation in any way they could. A neighbor gave evidence with camera footage from outside his home at the Longmeadow complex. Police have investigated the footage, hoping it will provide vital clues. As they watched, they witnessed a person walking with an axe, closely matching the description Sean had provided. The police then began searching for the identity of the man with the axe. On December 6, 2022, a major breakthrough occurred when a woman called the police to report a phone call she received from her son. With a shaky voice, she shared the shocking revelation that her son had just told her that he had killed his girlfriend. The seriousness of her words prompted an immediate response from law enforcement. They quickly located the woman and engaged her in conversation. During the conversation, police discovered that the man responsible for the disturbing confession was Ewan, a 42-year-old man who had previously been in a relationship with Julie. With this important information, the police made efforts to contact Ewan. However, Ewan abruptly hung up the call. To better understand Ewan's background, the police investigated his history. Ewan was born in 1979 in Roxbury. He had a wide range of interests and pursuits. A skilled athlete, he was passionate about ice hockey and even played in semi-professional leagues. Ewan also holds a bachelor's degree in history from Siena College. Not satisfied with just one career, he also pursued a career as a firefighter, showing his ambition. In 2006, Ewan DeWitt's life took a tumultuous turn when he was arrested in Connecticut for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. After pleading guilty, he was given a suspended prison sentence and placed on probation. However, Ewan turned his life around in 2009 when he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. Over the course of 5 years, he distinguished himself as a skilled weapons specialist and non-commissioned officer, ultimately earning the rank of Lance Corporal. During his time in the Marines, Ewan served as a machine gunner and was part of the elite 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. A notable photo from his time in service shows him bravely operating a .50 caliber machine gun on a vehicle during a defense exercise. Ewan's leadership skills and expertise helped him become captain of the machine gun section. Ewan served multiple tours in combat zones, including Afghanistan and the Middle East, alongside his fellow Marines. His selfless dedication was highlighted in a 2015 article in the Registered Citizen. One notable incident occurred shortly after the birth of his son, when he was arrested for attacking Julie Minogue. According to reports, he threw a large object at her, destroying her phone and preventing her from calling for help. Fearing for her safety, Julie sought refuge at a neighbor's house and contacted the police. In addition, Ewan, while intoxicated, getting into a heated argument with Julie and throwing a playpen at her head, causing a serious injury. Their son witnessed this incident and provided a statement. After Ewan went to rehabilitation, Julie sought a restraining order to protect herself from his abusive behavior. The court granted her a protective order that allowed for limited contact. However, Ewan was still granted visitation rights, which created ongoing concerns for Julie and her family's safety. In addition to their personal struggles, Julie and Ewan became embroiled in a series of family court cases starting in 2021. Julie initiated proceedings by seeking child support for their son Luke. The court ruled in her favor in October 2021, ordering Ewan to provide financial support. Ewan retaliated by taking Julie to court seeking resolution on visitation rights. In an effort to mediate the situation, the court granted supervised visitation, with a further hearing scheduled for April 2023 to revisit the matter. Julie and Ewan's divorce leads to many problems. Just 3 weeks before her death, Julie took action by going to Milford Police Station on November 14, 2022. She filed a complaint against Ewan for allegedly sending her more than 200 text messages in just 2 days, violating a protective order prohibiting him from making contact. Officer Scott Nablin carefully collected evidence of the text messages from Julie Minogue's phone, which further strengthened the case against Ewan. In a statement, Julie expressed deep concern for her safety and the well-being of her children. She stated that she could no longer tolerate the abuse and was seeking protection. Julie detailed the ongoing harassment she had endured and her fear of Ewan's behavior. She mentioned that he had a history of trouble with drugs and alcohol and was worried that he might harm her. In the meantime, Julie Minogue sought a civil restraining order against Ewan. On December 1, 2022, she presented evidence to a judge, including text messages, Ewan's history of substance abuse and mental health issues, and his violent past. Julie expressed concern for Ewan's well-being and emphasized the need for him to receive therapy. She believed Ewan posed a threat to others and should not be allowed to interact with anyone until he received proper treatment. The judge granted Julie a no-contact restraining order on December 1, 2022, to protect her from Ewan. The police investigation focused on Ewan, and they thoroughly searched the area around the Salem Walk condominium. They also visited a dive bar on Ocean Avenue in West Haven, asking patrons for help and providing information about the ongoing investigation. They asked anyone who saw Ewan to contact the authorities. Soon after, witnesses discovered someone resembling Ewan. They immediately alerted the police, who then observed the suspect entering a food truck in a nearby parking lot. Police quickly surrounded the truck and apprehended Ewan without any resistance. During the interrogation, Ewan initially remained silent, but after hours of intense interrogation, he finally confessed to killing Julie with an axe. He admitted to entering her house through the kitchen window, hiding and waiting for her to arrive. When Julie entered the kitchen, Ewan attacked her with an axe. Julie's son, Nicholas, witnessed the terrifying scene as he came downstairs. Frightened, Ewan dropped the axe on the gas stove and fled. The details of the incident, as revealed by Ewan, sent shockwaves through the investigation and provided a disturbing account of the events that occurred that night. During Ewan's first court appearance on December 7, 2022, Assistant State's Attorney Alana Paul updated the judge on the case. She said that Ewan confessed to the crime, but even if he did not, the evidence against him was compelling. Given the severity of the case, Paul argued that a significant sentence was necessary. Judge Odin Grogan set Ewan DeWitt's bond at $5 million due to concerns about his history of ignoring court orders and the need to prioritize public safety. As a result, Ewan was placed under surveillance. A hearing was scheduled for December 14, 2022, to further address the case. On December 14, 2022, Ewan faced multiple charges, including murder, violating a protective order, violating a restraining order, risking injury to a minor, and reckless endangerment. These charges aim to hold Ewan accountable for the full scope of his actions. A hearing for his pending cases was set for April 6, 2023. The family of the victim has released a statement, vowing to take action and hold accountable those who failed to protect their loved one. They hope that this case will lead to improved safeguards for individuals experiencing domestic violence and abuse. The family is committed to creating positive change and preventing similar tragedies from happening in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Johnson. In the quiet town of Bellevue, Idaho, a typical Tuesday morning on September 2, 2003, turned into a chaotic scene. At 6:20 a.m., residents were jolted by the sound of gunshots, followed by the wailing of sirens as sheriff's deputies from Blake County rushed to the Johnson residence. Inside the house, officers found a gruesome scene. Diane Johnson had been shot once in the head and was found in bed, while her husband Alan Johnson lay dead on the floor, having been shot once in the chest. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah was left shaken but unharmed after a traumatic event. As detectives investigated the scene, they discovered surprising secrets that ultimately led to a stunning discovery. But who had Sarah's parents, Diane and Alan, wronged, and what series of events led to their heartbreaking deaths? A frantic 911 call was made after a neighbor reported a horrific crime. The caller stated that a 16-year-old girl, Sarah Johnson, had arrived at her doorstep, frantically screaming that her parents had been shot. The caller reported hearing 2 gunshots. According to the neighbor, Kim, Sarah had run to her house in a state of panic, claiming that her parents, Diane and Alan Johnson, had been murdered. The police and emergency responders were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, law enforcement officials entered the house and were met with a disturbing scene. They found Diane, 52, in bed with a fatal gunshot wound to her head. It appeared that she had been killed while she was asleep. The walls and ceiling near the headboard were splattered with blood, and a fragment of her skull was found on the floor. Alan's body was found on the floor beside Diane's side of the bed. He was wearing only a towel, and a large pool of blood had formed around him. Initially, police thought they had a clear-cut murder-suicide case. However, as they took a closer look at the crime scene, their theory quickly unraveled. At the scene, investigators noticed the sound of running water and followed the trail of blood to the adjacent bathroom. The shower was still on. Once they turned off the water, they observed blood splatter on the walls and a single bullet hole in the shower wall. The officers then expanded their search of the house for more evidence. In the bedroom where Diane's body was found, investigators discovered what they believed to be the murder weapon, a .264 caliber Winston rifle, on the floor. At the foot of the bed, 2 kitchen knives were also discovered. Another knife was found on the bed of the Johnson's son, Matt. The placement of these knives baffled investigators. The presence of the knives at the scene raised many questions. It was unclear why they were placed in such a deliberate manner and what significance they held. A further peculiarity was the lack of forced entry, which suggested that the killer may have been someone familiar with the family's habits. Specifically, the fact that the Johnsons rarely locked their doors, a detail known only to those close to them, seemed particularly relevant. Additionally, the house showed no signs of having been ransacked, which contradicted the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Sarah told police she was asleep when she heard a gunshot. She immediately got up and ran to her parents' bedroom to call out for her mother. That's when she heard a second gunshot. Fearful for her safety, Sarah rushed to her neighbor's house for help. She didn't see the person who fired the shots. Her neighbor, Kim Richards, backed up Sarah's account and was the one who called 911. On the property was a separate guest house that belonged to a family friend, 45-year-old Mel Spiegel. As investigators entered the house, they discovered a crucial piece of evidence on the bed, the scope from the rifle found at the crime scene. However, Mel Spiegel was unexpectedly absent. His sudden disappearance raised suspicions, making him a person of interest for the investigators. Sergeant Walt Femling ordered the property sealed off and instructed officers to stop the waste disposal truck from collecting trash. A critical piece of evidence was nearly collected and taken away, but a deputy intervened just in time, stopping the truck just a house away. The theory was that Mel had a confrontation with Alan and Diane, which escalated into a violent argument, resulting in their deaths. As investigators explored this possibility, forensic teams searched the trash cans and found additional evidence. Inside a bundled-up pink bathrobe, they discovered a latex glove, a single brown leather glove matching the one found in the Johnsons' bedroom, and ammunition for a .25 caliber gun. The evidence was carefully tagged and sent for DNA testing. As investigators pieced together their own scenario, it became clear that the killer likely had prior knowledge of the Johnsons' unlocked doors and the trash collection schedule. It was possible that the killer disposed of the evidence in the trash before fleeing the scene after the double homicide. Mel was located in Boise, Idaho. He voluntarily met with investigators at the Boise police station. The investigators inquired about Mel's activities earlier that day, and Mel stated that he had spent the weekend with his family. He was planning to return to Bell in a week. To verify Mel's alibi, investigators contacted his family members, who confirmed that he was indeed with them. During the conversation, Mel discussed his relationship with Alan and Diane, explaining that he had rented the guest house from they for years. Mel described his relationship with they as close and very good. When questioned about the rifle used in the murders, Mel acknowledged that it was his, but claimed it had been stored in his closet before he left for Boise over the weekend. Investigators then inquired about potential enemies of they. Mel shared that Alan and Diane had been concerned about their daughter Sarah's relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, who was allegedly living in the country without proper documentation and selling drugs. Mel specifically mentioned Bruno Santos as someone investigators should look into. Mel encouraged investigators to talk to other family members, leading them to reconstruct the Johnson family's history. Here's what they discovered. Alan and Diane Johnson's relationship began in the early 1980s. At the time, Diane was a single mother to a toddler son, Matt, from a previous relationship. They got married in 1983, and Alan adopted Matt as his own son. The family settled in a beautiful home in the quiet city of Bell, Idaho. In 1987, they welcomed a new addition, a daughter named Sarah Johnson, born on January 25. Their children, Matt and Sarah, were both doing well in their studies. Matt, who was 22 at the time, was a university student at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Sarah was not only excelling in her schoolwork, but was also an accomplished athlete on her school's volleyball team and received adoring attention from her father Alan. The investigators had been ruling out potential suspects and were about to reveal underlying family conflicts that had been escalating over the past few months. With Mel cleared as a suspect, the Johnson family was known to be happy and loving, but things changed when Sarah started dating Bruno Santos. Investigators interviewed the family members, including Matt, the son who had returned home from university, and Diane's sister and brother-in-law, Linda and Jim Fave. All of them described the family life as happy and normal until Sarah and Bruno became a couple. According to Matt, Linda, and Jim, Sarah's relationship with Bruno caused significant tension in the family, which escalated over the months leading up to the murder. Sarah resisted her parents' rules, particularly when they forbade her from seeing Bruno again. Despite this, she continued to defy them. Jim revealed to investigators that Bruno had a potential motive to murder Diane and Alan. A few days before the murders, Alan and Diane had discovered that Sarah had lied about sleeping over at a friend's house. In reality, she had spent the night with Bruno. Alan informed Jim about the situation and asked him to join them in confronting Bruno. Jim informed investigators that Alan was enraged and threatened to report Bruno to the police for assaulting underage Sarah. The three then left together. A charge of this severity could result in Bruno's deportation. After hearing Jim's account, investigators suspected that Bruno had a strong motive to harm the Johnsons. They decided it was time to speak with Bruno. Santos County Police were familiar with Bruno Santos, a high school dropout with a history of minor drug-related offenses. When questioned, Bruno became confrontational and arrogant, making it challenging for investigators to deal with him. During questioning, Bruno claimed he had recently proposed to Sarah, and she had accepted. It's thought that Bruno made this claim to demonstrate his love for Sarah and prove that he wouldn't have done anything to harm their relationship. When investigators inquired about his whereabouts on the morning of the murders, Bruno said he was sleeping on the couch at his residence. He suggested that officers contact his mother, who confirmed that she was also at home with him at the time. Despite this, his alibi was not considered particularly solid. When investigators questioned Bruno about the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson, Bruno expressed his hatred for Alan and Diane Johnson. Bruno was initially the prime suspect because of his obvious motive. He was angry with the Johnson family, especially Diane, Sarah's mother. By killing the Johnsons, Bruno hoped to be with Sarah. The investigation into Bruno's involvement in the Alan and Diane Johnson murders took a significant step forward when a search warrant was executed at his home. As a result, the clothing and shoes he wore on the day of the incident were seized for forensic testing. Additionally, Bruno's fingerprints were taken to compare with any prints found at the crime scene. A DNA sample was also collected from Bruno at the hospital, along with hair clippings and scrapings from his hands. Based on the evidence gathered, Bruno was identified as the primary suspect in the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson. Despite thorough investigation, forensic experts found no evidence linking Bruno to the crime scene. Neither Diane's nor Alan's blood was found on Bruno's clothes or shoes, and no DNA, hair, or fingerprints from the accused were detected near the bodies. Additionally, no physical evidence placed Bruno in their room. The gloves and bathrobe tested negative for any incriminating evidence. The crime scene yielded no DNA or fingerprints from Bruno, and no blood or DNA from the victims was found on his clothing. Bruno was eventually ruled out as a suspect in the case. As investigators took a closer look, their attention turned to someone else. They began to question Sarah's family and friends more thoroughly about her home life and personal relationships. This led to the discovery that Sarah had been prescribed antidepressants and that her relationship with her parents was strained. Her family members had initially dismissed her behavior as typical for a teenager, assuming she was going through a normal phase of rebellion and testing boundaries with her parents. Linda, Sarah's aunt, grew increasingly suspicious of her niece's behavior in the aftermath of her parents' deaths. She reported to investigators that Sarah was not exhibiting the typical signs of grieving and instead seemed more focused on returning to her normal routine with friends and school. Sarah showed little emotional response to the loss of her parents, which Linda found unusual and even alarming. Her reactions seemed remarkably detached and strange. This raised more questions, prompting investigators to speak with some of Sarah's friends to gather more insight into her behavior following the tragic events. It was clear to everyone that Sarah did not show enough concern about the deaths of Alan and Diane Johnson. In fact, she seemed more focused on her own appearance, particularly getting her nails painted. What struck investigators as unusual, however, was Sarah's reaction to Bruno's arrest. Instead of being angry, she appeared to be worried about him, which seemed odd given that he was suspected of killing her parents. This remark led investigators to consider Sarah as a potential suspect, the most worrying aspect being that Sarah could commit such a heinous crime. The Johnsons' home remained an active crime scene, with investigators now focusing on Sarah's room as a second key area of interest. A question had arisen about how the blood splatter had traveled such a distance. To address this, a gun expert was brought in to examine the splatter pattern more closely. After analyzing the trajectory from Alan and Diane's room to Sarah's, the expert determined that both bedroom doors were open at the time of the shooting. This conclusion was supported by the presence of blood deposits on the back edge of Sarah's door, where the hinges are located, suggesting that the door was open, allowing the projectile to enter her bedroom. This meant that both bedroom doors, as well as Sarah's door, were open and there was a hallway in between. During the investigation, plumbers were called to the scene to address a clogged toilet in one of the bathrooms. The clog was found to be caused by a shower cap. As a result, investigators decided to question Linda, Matt, and Mel Spiegel about some of the evidence they had discovered. Both Matt and Linda identified a pink bathrobe as belonging to Sarah. Mel Spiegel confirmed that Sarah had a key to the guest house. He also revealed that Sarah was aware of the gun stored in the closet. However, investigators faced a challenge in linking Sarah to the evidence. Eyewitnesses reported that Sarah did not have any visible blood on her when she ran to a neighbor's house for help on the morning of the murders. Forensic experts used luminol to test Sarah's clothes for blood splatter, but found none. Despite this, investigators obtained a warrant to seize and test the clothes Sarah was wearing that morning. Meanwhile, investigators asked Sarah to return for another interview to determine if her account had changed since they last spoke. They had noticed small inconsistencies in her previous statements. When questioned again, investigators found that Sarah's story had altered significantly. Specifically, they identified at least 5 changes to her explanations. In some instances, she claimed to have been asleep and was awoken by the sound of a gunshot, but her story varied across different interviews. When questioned about the door to her parents' room, Sarah struggled to recall whether it was open or closed at the time of the shooting. Despite Sarah's inconsistencies, investigators maintained a calm demeanor during questioning to avoid raising her suspicions. They were already aware that both bedroom doors were open, which was the only explanation for the blood splatter on Sarah's bedroom wall. As part of the investigation to clear her name, Sarah was asked to provide a DNA sample, hair samples, and hand scrapings, all of which were sent to the lab for testing. The pajama top and bottom she was wearing on the morning of the murders were also sent to the lab for examination by forensic specialist Rod Engard. Under a high-powered microscope, Engard found no blood on the front of the robe. However, on the back of the garment, he discovered patterns of high-velocity blood splatter. These stains were extremely small, some even smaller than a pencil mark, and were layered on top of each other, indicating a high-energy impact. He discovered blue cotton fibers and green paint specks on the inside of the robe that matched the shirt Sarah wore that morning. However, the most incriminating evidence was yet to come. Lab results confirmed that Sarah's DNA was found on the inner lining of the latex glove, and gun residue was detected on both pairs of the brown leather gloves. The robe, leather gloves, and latex gloves were sent to a lab in Chicago, Kahn and Associates, for further analysis. The lab found gunshot residue on all three items. The blood on the gloves and robe belonged to both Alan and Diane. This evidence was sufficient for investigators to arrest and charge Sarah with the double homicide of Alan and Diane Johnson on October 29, 2003. Sarah Johnson was arrested for the murders of her parents, Alan and Diane Johnson, and was held without bail at the Blake County Jail awaiting trial. The shocking crime made headlines across the country, captivating the nation's attention and sparking a media frenzy. To build a case against Sarah, investigators and prosecutors had to create a convincing argument that demonstrated her motivation and capability to commit such a horrific crime. Sarah's parents disapproved of her relationship with Bruno from the start. As a result, Sarah began sneaking around behind their backs and acting out in typical teenage fashion. However, the turning point came just a few days before the murders. A heated argument with her parents drove Sarah to desperation. She had lied about staying with a friend, when in reality she was with Bruno. Her father's threats to have Bruno charged with assault and deported to Mexico pushed Sarah to the edge. Investigators and prosecutors believed that this was the moment Sarah hatched a plan to eliminate her parents and start a new life with Bruno. On the morning of the murders, she went to the guest house to retrieve the rifle, setting the events in motion. Sarah carefully prepared herself to commit the crime by putting on latex gloves, leather gloves, and a shower cap to prevent blood from getting on her hair and clothes. She then went to her parents' room, where she shot her mother, Diane, in the head while she was asleep. When her father, Alan, got out of the shower and opened the bathroom door, Sarah shot him in the chest. After killing her parents, Sarah attempted to make it look like an intruder had committed the crime by placing knives in the bedrooms. She then gathered up the evidence and threw it away in the trash, hoping that the waste disposal company would collect it before investigators could find it. However, she made a critical mistake by not considering the evidence that would be found in her own room. Additionally, the shower cap she had worn became lodged in a plumbing system, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence. The evidence against Sarah Johnson was overwhelming, and her trial began in February 2005, 2 years after her parents' murders. At 18 years old, Sarah stood accused of killing her parents. Her defense team maintained that Sarah was innocent and that an intruder had committed the crime. However, the prosecution was well prepared to present their case. They introduced physical evidence found at the crime scene and testimonies from family and friends that raised suspicions about Sarah's behavior. On the morning of the murders, there were 3 people in the Johnson household: Alan, Diane, and Sarah. 2 of them did not survive. The one person who did come out alive was Sarah Johnson, who was now sitting in the courtroom. The most damaging testimony came from Bruno Santos, who not only sought to clear his own name in the murder trial but also provided the jury with insight into Sarah's state of mind before the murders. Bruno testified that he and Sarah had planned to get married and that she had described a future where they would live together in a beautiful house, happy with just each other. He also revealed that Sarah frequently expressed her hatred for her father and even talked about shooting him. After 5 weeks of testimony, evidence, and explanations of the crime scene, the jury delivered its verdict on March 16, 2005. Sarah, 18, was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho. Despite making multiple appeals to reduce her sentence, Sarah remains in custody as all her appeals have been denied. Following her sentencing, her family members have publicly expressed their feelings about Sarah and her actions. The murders of Alan and Diane have had a devastating impact on their family, with most members believing that Sarah is responsible and deserves her punishment. Sarah's brother, Matt, has stated that Sarah showed no remorse for killing their parents and believes that if given a second chance, she would try to avoid being caught again. At the sentencing hearing, Pat Dishman, Diane's mother, addressed Sarah directly. She told her granddaughter that despite everything, they still loved her. However, her actions had left a devastating impact on their entire family. "We'd been absolutely destroyed by the loss of your Alan and Diane, and it was even harder to come to terms with the fact that it was you who did it." Alan's sister Lynn expressed her concerns about Sarah's character, stating that she is spoiled and violent, and capable of committing murder if released from prison. Lynn urged the judge to consider keeping Sarah incarcerated permanently. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Scott Ponder. Scott Dean Ponder was born on February 7, 1973, to a loving family. His mother, Beverly Guy, and stepfather, Terry Guy, encouraged his passion for cars and motorcycles from a young age. They supported his development as a rider and even helped him obtain a racing license as soon as he was eligible. Scott's talent and dedication earned him recognition, including numerous admirers and local hero status in Chesney. Scott was a sociable person who enjoyed spending time with many people, and they enjoyed his company as well. In the late 1990s, Scott started repairing bikes in his grandmother's backyard, which eventually led to the establishment of Superbike Motorsports. The business expanded to a one-garage building in 2001, and Scott brought in his best friend, Brian Lucas, as a partner. They partnered to obtain a Suzuki dealership, resulting in swift expansion and achievement. Brian, who initially worked part-time when the business first started, left his job to become the store's full-time manager. Through their dedication and expertise, the duo attracted numerous customers, and the business began to flourish. Despite being salesmen, they prioritized educating their customers about bikes and racing. Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, who initially visited the store occasionally, began to visit regularly and eventually took on responsibilities such as accounting, payroll, and cash management. With the trio's combined efforts, the business thrived, selling 100,000 motorbikes every month. Scott attended an industry convention in Chicago, where he met his future wife, Melissa Brackman, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High School. They instantly connected and enjoyed each other's company, leading to frequent meetups as their relationship deepened. Eventually, they decided to get married, and their love life, both before and after the wedding, resembled a fairy tale, with their love growing stronger each day. I met Scott at a motorcycle show in Indianapolis, where he struck me as a kind and charming Southern gentleman. My feelings for him developed rapidly, and I soon realized I was in love with him. Scott and I decided to start a family, but we struggled to conceive. We sought medical help, and after months of trying, I finally became pregnant with a baby boy. In October 2003, I discovered I was pregnant while visiting my hometown. I took a pregnancy test at my brother's house without telling anyone, and I was overjoyed when the test was positive. Scott was thrilled when I shared the news with him. Around the same time, Scott's business was booming, with millions of dollars in sales in the first year. To keep up with the demand, he expanded his store and hired a new mechanic, Chris Sherbert. Chris was well known in town for his exceptional wrench skills, which caught Scott's attention. Scott, Beverly, Brian, and Chris formed a talented team that gained recognition beyond their small town of Chesney. Scott Ponder's life was going smoothly until disaster struck. November 6, 2003, was a sunny day, but the atmosphere at Superbike Motorsports was vastly different. You might remember where you were on that day. I recall it clearly. I had spoken to Scott around 2:15 p.m., and our conversation was brief and normal. He said goodbye, and that was the last time we spoke. Scott and the others began their day at the shop as usual. The store had a few customers browsing, including Kelly Sisk and his 4-year-old son. Kelly was there to purchase a go-kart for his family, and after completing the transaction, he lingered in the shop for a bit. Brian was supposed to be on holiday with his family, but Scott called him in to address a customer complaint about a neglected bike. Brian arrived at the shop and immediately started working on the bike. Meanwhile, Scott was helping another customer when his mother, Beverly, stopped by. She had just taken Scott's cancer-stricken grandmother to chemotherapy and was planning to deposit money into Scott's account at the bank later that day, around 2:30 p.m. Beverly lent a hand to Scott at the counter, assisting him with his tasks. Scott's friend Noel called the Superbike Motorsports shop, also known as the shop. Beverly answered the phone and agreed to let Noel stop by, which he said would take only 7 minutes. After hanging up, Beverly went to use the bathroom. Within those 7 minutes, a tragic event unfolded. Scott, Brian, Beverly, and Chris, the 4 people present at the shop, were brutally shot and killed. The shooting occurred at 3 p.m. inside the Superbike Motorsports premises. When Scott's friend Noel arrived, he found Scott and Brian lying motionless at the front of the shop. Initially, Noel thought they were playing a prank and even kicked them, telling them to stop joking around. However, upon seeing the pool of blood beneath their bodies, he quickly realized the gravity of the situation and called 911. Noel reported the incident to the emergency operator, stating that everyone at the shop had been shot and was lying in a pool of blood, including his mom, the mechanic, and the owner. The police and paramedics rushed to the scene, as this was the first quadruple murder in the small town of Chesney. The news spread rapidly, drawing not only the victims' families but also a crowd of onlookers to the crime scene. The police launched an immediate investigation and began collecting evidence at the crime scene. They discovered Chris's body at the back of the shop, positioned as if he had been working on a bike just before being killed. Beverly's body was found inside the shop, near the bathroom, suggesting she was ambushed as she exited. The bodies of Brian and Scott were located at the front of the store, with Brian's closer to the door and Scott's closer to a parked car. It appeared that both men had attempted to flee after hearing gunshots and encountering the shooter, but were unsuccessful. A thorough search of the crime scene by the police and forensic team yielded blood samples and other evidence. The killings were determined to be an execution-style homicide, with the shooter intentionally targeting the victims and shooting them at close range in the chest and head. Melissa, Scott's wife, received a call about the shooting and rushed to the scene. Detectives launched a thorough investigation and quickly found their first lead. Several passers-by reported seeing a couple lingering near the shop around the time of the murder. The detectives created sketches of the suspects based on the eyewitnesses' descriptions and distributed the pictures throughout South Carolina. The detectives initially suspected that the man and they was the shooter, and that he had attacked Chris and Beverly from behind while she distracted Scott and Brian at the front of the shop. However, this was only a theory, and no concrete evidence supported it. Despite months of searching, the police were unable to find any new leads. As media coverage intensified, detectives re-examined the case from a different angle, which ultimately led to a breakthrough. The detectives began to scrutinize the victims' pasts and lifestyles. While Scott, Beverly, and Brian appeared to be clean, Chris, the mechanic, had a more complex background. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Chris had previously worked for a company with ties to the drug trade. It was also revealed that Chris may have been involved in smuggling and was set to appear in court the following Monday, prior to the murders. In 2003, the police were actively working to combat a growing drug problem, particularly among young people. With Chris's connection to the drug trade now apparent, detectives and the public began to question whether the motive behind the quadruple homicide was to kill Chris specifically, with the other victims being unintentional casualties. It was also speculated that Chris's scheduled court appearance may have been a motive for his murder, as those involved in the drug business may have believed he would testify against them. Although this theory seemed plausible, particularly given that Chris was the first to be shot, there was no concrete evidence to support it. As a result, the investigation once again stalled. The case remained unsolved for an entire year, until the detectives decided to approach it from a fresh perspective. The detectives discovered that Brian, a friend and co-worker of Scott's, had been searching for a new house weeks before the murder. However, his wife Robin claimed to have had no knowledge of this decision. This revelation raised suspicions about the state of their marriage. Brian's mother, Lorraine Lucas, later revealed that their marriage was unhappy and strained, and that Brian had been planning to leave Robin to live alone. Lorraine recalled a tense encounter between Brian and Robin, during which Robin made faces behind Brian's back, leading to a confrontation when Brian asked her to treat his mother with respect. While this incident may not have seemed directly related to the shooting at first, it would later become a crucial piece of the puzzle. The quadruple murder was a catastrophic event that left the families of the 4 victims deeply traumatized and devastated. Melissa, in particular, struggled to cope with the loss of her beloved husband. Her life was once flawless, but a devastating event changed everything, leaving her to put the shattered remains back together. Despite her grief, Melissa found the strength to carry on for the sake of her newborn son, Scott Ponder Jr., who was born in June 2004. The police continued to call on Melissa for questioning, but she remained strong for her child's sake. In a surprising turn of events, the police obtained a DNA sample from Scott Ponder Jr.'s diaper, which was collected after Melissa had changed him at the station. The results of the DNA test shocked everyone, revealing that Ponder Jr.'s DNA matched Brian's, not Scott's. This discovery sparked tension between Melissa and her father-in-law, William Ponder, who repeatedly questioned her about the truth. Melissa was told that the detectives believed they had evidence linking her to the crime, and she was given a clear warning: if the proof implicated her, they would come for her wherever she was. As the investigation continued, the detectives began to focus on a possible love triangle between Scott, Melissa, and Brian. Rumors about Melissa's infidelity soon spread throughout the neighborhood, further complicating the case. Brian's mother considered the possibility of him having an affair due to his unhappiness in marriage and the thought of divorce. However, Melissa consistently denied any involvement with Brian and affirmed Scott Ponder child's paternity, stating that she and Scott Ponder had struggled to conceive. Melissa was certain that the child belonged to her and Scott, and she remained convinced even after being questioned multiple times. For a year and a half, detectives monitored Melissa's every move, searching for a lead. Then, after 18 months, they revealed a startling discovery: the blood sample collected from the crime scene contained an error. A DNA test showed a match between Brian and Beverly's DNA, which should not be the case since Scott was Beverly's son, not Brian. Realizing their mistake, detectives understood that the blood samples from Scott and Brian had been mislabeled due to their close proximity at the crime scene. The discovery cleared Melissa's name regarding the love triangle theory, and detectives began to investigate a connection between the Superbike Motorsports homicide and another murder that occurred just 30 meters away, 5 months earlier. On May 16, 2003, a triple homicide shook the town of Greer, South Carolina. The incident took place at the Blue Ridge Savings Bank, where Sylvia Holtzclaw was due to start her shift. However, a local couple, Dee and Maggie Barnes, visited the bank at around 1:30 p.m. A 911 call was made to the Greer Police Department, reporting a shooting at the bank. Unfortunately, Sylvia, Dee, and Maggie were found shot to death. The Greer Police Department received a distress call from the Blue Ridge Savings Bank. One of the responding officers described the scene, noting that they were among the first to arrive. Like the Superbike Motorsports incident, the shooting occurred in broad daylight with no witnesses present. After reviewing the CCTV footage, police observed a red car driving towards the bank at 1:24 p.m. and leaving 3 minutes after the incident. A red car was spotted driving to a bank on Frontage Road at 1:24 p.m. 3 minutes later, the Barnes family was seen driving in the same area. Coincidentally, a similar red car was seen at the scene of a quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports. Detectives began searching for the red car and discovered it had been stolen from a rental lot by 39-year-old Emerson Wright days before the homicide. Police believed Emerson had entered the bank to rob it, but panicked and shot a couple who tried to intervene. However, detectives were unable to question Emerson about the bank and Superbike Motorsports murders due to a series of events that unfolded 2 years later. Emerson was wanted for a string of burglaries in the Atlanta area when he was chased by a state trooper. He crashed his car, got out, and shot himself in the head with a single gunshot wound. Although detectives noted similarities between their cases, they did not believe they were connected. The quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports in 2003 went cold just months later, leaving the victims' families, including Melissa, without any answers for 13 long years. Despite the lack of progress, Melissa and the other families of the victims refused to give up, tirelessly searching for any lead that might uncover the truth behind the gruesome crime. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded nothing. However, in 2016, the case was reopened after detectives made a breakthrough. This development brought new hope to the families, 13 years after the crime had taken place. The man behind the quadruple murder finally emerged when he was arrested for an unrelated crime. During his interrogation, he confessed to the Superbike Motorsports murders. The killer was 45-year-old Todd Kohlhepp, born on March 7, 1971, to parents Reggie and William. After his parents' divorce when he was just 2 years old, Todd began living with his mother and her new partner, but he often sought to spend more time with his biological father. Todd's behavior was extremely aggressive and volatile, particularly when he was young. He struggled with controlling his anger, which often led to violent outbursts. During his time in nursery school, he killed a goldfish with bleach and shot a dog with a BB gun. Despite spending 3.5 months in a psychiatric hospital in Georgia, his behavior showed no signs of improvement. As a last resort, his mother, Ray G., sent him to live with his father, William, in the hopes that a change of environment would help him manage his behavior. However, this change had little effect. At the age of 15, Todd planned and executed the kidnapping of 14-year-old Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona, on November 25, 1986. Todd knocked on Christy's door, threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, and forced her to follow him to his home. Once there, he tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and assaulted her. After the assault, he walked her home and threatened to kill her entire family if she told anyone about the incident. However, Christy confided in her parents, who immediately called 911. As a result, Todd was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and the other charges were dropped. Todd was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was required to register as a sex offender. When Todd was released, he was a reformed person and he turned over a new leaf, started his own business, and even got a job. For a long time, there were no more complaints filed against him. However, in 2016, a disturbing incident occurred. On August 31, 2016, 30-years-old Carla Brown and her 32-years-old boyfriend, Charlie David Carver, went missing after they were last seen visiting Todd's house to remove brush from one of his properties. Investigations led to a horrific discovery on November 3, 2016, when Carla was found chained to a wall inside a metal storage container on Todd's property. Further investigations uncovered the body of Charlie, which had multiple gunshot wounds. Carla reported to detectives that Todd had shot Charlie and kept her captive, regularly assaulting her brutally and threatening her not to try to escape. Todd was arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, he confessed to being the one responsible for a shooting that occurred at Superbike Motorsports 13 years earlier. On November 5, 2016, Todd was brought in for questioning and recounted the events of November 6, 2003, in a matter-of-fact way, without showing any signs of fear or guilt. According to Todd, on November 6, 2003, he bought a Suzuki GSX-R 750 from Superbike Motorsports, but soon realized he couldn't ride it due to his lack of experience. He decided to exchange the bike for a more beginner-friendly model. However, this exchange didn't happen on the same day. Todd told the detectives that his friends Scott and Brian teased him about his inability to ride the bike. After the bike theft, which occurred 14 days after the purchase, Todd filed a police report, but the bike was never recovered. Adding to his frustration, the police officer handling the case made fun of him, and neither the police nor the shop contacted him about the stolen bike or the $1,000 insurance deposit he had lost. Todd began attending college at Greenville Tech, but his interest in bikes never waned. He found himself returning to Superbike Motorsports, where he had previously shopped. However, his interactions with two employees, Scott and Chris, turned negative. According to Todd, they would mock and laugh at him whenever he visited the shop. One day, Todd decided to take revenge on they men. He waited until the shop was empty, except for Scott, Chris, Beverly, and himself. Then, he shot and killed the 4 people he had encountered. Todd later claimed that Beverly was not his intended target, but rather an innocent bystander who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victims' families finally found some closure and justice after 13 years, thanks to Todd's confession. In addition to the killings at Superbike Motorsports, Todd confessed to murdering Johnny, Joe, and Megan Lee Coxey, and Charlie David Carver, all of whom died from gunshot wounds. Despite being a serial killer, Todd did not face a trial. Instead, prosecutors negotiated a plea deal with him after consulting with the victims' families and a survivor. As part of the deal, the state offered Todd a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which he accepted just 7 months after his arrest. Todd was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences on May 23, 2017. In addition to these life sentences, he received 30 years for assault and 30 years for kidnapping. However, the fact that Todd pleaded guilty without a trial left many, including the victims' families, feeling that justice had not been fully served. The case also outraged the general public, who felt that the long wait for justice was unfair. Seventh Circuit Solicitor Barry Barnett expressed the frustration felt by many, stating that families should not have to wait years for justice. However, for Melissa, the wife of victim Scott Ponder, the sentencing brought a sense of relief and closure. She and other family members of the victims came together to hold a vigil in memory of their loved ones. After 13 years of pain and suffering, the victims' families finally had the answers they had been seeking about what had happened to their loved ones. In an interview, Melissa expressed her skepticism about Todd's motive for the murders, stating that she did not believe that her husband would have behaved in a way that would have provoked Todd. She recalled the kindness and good humor of Scott and another victim, Brian, and found it hard to believe that Todd's claims about their behavior were true. While Melissa was grateful that justice had been served, She felt that Todd's lack of remorse and casual demeanor during the investigation and court proceedings were disturbing. Many members of the public felt that Todd's crimes were so heinous that he deserved the death penalty. Todd's actions were heinous, and his lack of remorse is shocking. During the interrogation, he spoke about the murders in a casual, matter-of-fact way, as if recalling a past memory. This was truly despicable. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Justine Valdez. On May 19, 2018, 24-year-old Justine Valdez went about her daily routine as usual. After finishing paperwork for her residency permit, she went to the gym and worked out until around 4:20 p.m. Then, she planned to head home. Her mother, Teres, asked her to pick up some bread on the way, so Valdez stopped at the store before catching the 185 bus to Bray, which left after 6:09 p.m. The bus dropped Justine off at a familiar stop near her rural home, from which she normally walked the final 15 minutes to her doorstep. However, when Justine failed to arrive home, her mother Teres became worried. Teres was used to Justine being on time and communicating regularly, but when she couldn't reach her daughter by phone or message, she started to get anxious. As the hours passed with no word from Justine, Teres decided to go out and look for her. Teres's daughter Justine was expected to return home by bus, but when she failed to arrive, Teres became increasingly worried and frantic. She stopped people on the street and asked if they had seen Justine, describing her Asian features and the sporty clothes she was wearing. Despite several people claiming to have spotted Justine getting off the bus, her disappearance remained a complete mystery. Teres's worry escalated as each passing minute brought no new information about Justine's whereabouts or safety. Teres was overwhelmed by anxiety and eventually reported Justine missing to the police, in the hope that they could locate her. Detectives promptly started investigating Justine's vanishing and initiated a thorough search. They looked into her daily routine and questioned people who knew her to explore every possibility, including whether Justine had left of her own free will. Justine Valdez lived with her parents, Teres and Daniel, in the quiet Irish countryside. Her parents had moved to Ireland from the Philippines in search of a better life and brought Justine to join them in 2015. Despite struggling financially, Justine's parents worked hard to support her education and well-being. Justine was a responsible and diligent student, studying accounting at university while working part-time jobs to help pay for her studies and support her family. She worked as a waitress in Bray and as a childcare provider in her neighborhood, and even lived in the servant quarters of a large estate where her parents worked as a gardener and housekeeper. Justine was known for being reliable, hardworking, and dedicated to her responsibilities. Given her close relationship with her family and her strong sense of duty, it was unthinkable that she would voluntarily leave them behind. Her limited social life and lack of typical teenage rebellion also made it seem unlikely that she would run away. Despite efforts to contact everyone who knew Justine, no one had any information about her disappearance. As a 24-year-old, Justine had long since moved past her teenage years and was very close to her family, making it unlikely that she would run away. She kept her parents informed about her daily activities, and on the day she went missing, she and her mother exchanged 63 messages. The last message was at 6:24 p.m. when Justine got off the bus. During the investigation, a crucial tip came from Justine's coworkers. A woman who was driving by with her 12-year-old son reported a disturbing incident to the police. She claimed to have seen a man pushing a woman who looked like Justine into the trunk of a black Nissan Qashqai. This incident happened just minutes after Justine got off the bus, and the police were quickly alerted to the situation. A second motorist soon came across a disturbing scene. An Asian girl was sitting in the back of a vehicle, tapping on the window and clearly frightened. The driver was initially unsure of what to make of the situation, but after discussing it with his wife when he got home, he realized the seriousness of what he had seen. He immediately called the authorities at 7:20 p.m. to report a possible kidnapping. Around the same time, another driver contacted the police to report a suspicious Nissan vehicle driving erratically about 6 kilometers from N's car. Patrol officers quickly responded to the location given by the initial female caller. When they arrived, they found Justine's broken cell phone and a bag of bread on the roadside, which raised serious concerns for her safety. Based on this evidence, investigators believed that the kidnapper had targeted Justine while she was walking home from the bus stop. The kidnapper had tried to put Justine in the trunk of the car, but she resisted. He then forced her into the back seat and drove away to an unknown location. The suspect's black Nissan was immediately put on the wanted list, and a large search effort began, involving patrol cars and helicopters. However, the search was difficult due to the darkness of the night, and no immediate leads were found. When daylight came, the search resumed, and detectives re-examined eyewitness accounts and narrowed down the list of potential suspects. Mark Hennessy, a 40-year-old man, was identified as a person of interest in the investigation because his appearance matched the description of the kidnapper. Police officers visited Mark Hennessy's home, but his wife, Nicola, had no idea where he was. She told them that he had left for a drink after work the day before and hadn't returned. This new information raised even more suspicions about Mark, leading investigators to look deeper into his past. Mark seemed like a model citizen. He was a devoted husband and father of 2 young daughters, with a stable job as an estimator on construction sites. He came from a respected family and lived in a wealthy neighborhood with other young families. He had no prior run-ins with the law and appeared to be a pillar of the community. However, the police knew that people can often hide their true nature behind a mask of respectability. Police officers visited the bar Mark had gone to the night before to ask questions and gather information. The bar staff confirmed that Mark had been there, but only stayed for a short time to have a beer and watch a soccer match around 5:40 p.m. He left the bar in a visibly agitated state and returned around midnight, staying only for 10 minutes before driving away in his car at 11 p.m. After further review, it was discovered that Mark had actually returned to the bar's entrance to chat with someone before leaving again. A review of the bar's CCTV footage confirmed the staff's accounts of Mark's brief visits. However, this still left a gap in his whereabouts between 5:40 p.m. and 11 p.m., and investigators remained unsure of what Mark had done during this time. Meanwhile, detectives also obtained CCTV footage of the bus route that Justine had taken, which led to a disturbing discovery. Mark's black Nissan was spotted following the bus just 30 minutes after he left the bar, raising suspicions about his involvement in Justine's disappearance. As the search for Mark's car and Justine continued, it became increasingly clear that the incidents were connected, and Mark emerged as the prime suspect in her abduction. Despite efforts to track his cell phone, Mark managed to stay one step ahead of the authorities. He made a single call to his wife, telling her he would be away for a while, but refused to surrender to the police even when his family begged him to do so. The investigators learned about the encounter from Mark's parents, and as a result, they strengthened their search for Mark. However, Mark remained elusive. The police turned to the public for help, issuing appeals through the media and asking anyone with information about Justine, Mark, or his car to come forward. One person responded to the appeal, spotting a Nissan that matched the description of Mark's car. She followed the vehicle to Cherrywood Park, where she observed the driver closely before notifying the authorities. When the police arrived, they found a man covered in blood sitting behind the wheel. Mark refused to leave his vehicle, even when police tried to persuade him. He threatened them with a knife, so they had to shoot him to protect themselves. The bullet hit Mark in the shoulder. When police took him out of the car, he was awake but not cooperating. They searched the vehicle, hoping to find Justine, but she was not there. Police questioned Mark repeatedly, but he wouldn't answer. Medical staff treated his injuries, and he was rushed to the hospital. Doctors fought to save Mark's life, hoping he would reveal Justine's location. Unfortunately, the bullet had bounced off and hit Mark in the head, killing him. Further investigation showed that the blood on Mark's face and body was his own, and he had several new stab wounds on his arm and neck. The police speculated that Mark, driven by a fear of being caught, had used a knife from his vehicle to prepare for a confrontation. When they finally caught him, the officers felt a sense of disappointment. They had found Mark and his vehicle, but their main goal was still unfulfilled. They had not found the missing person, Justine. At the scene, they found a note, but it was difficult to read due to the presence of blood. The officers were, however, able to decipher the words "sorry" and "Pease Castle," which provided a lead in the search for Justine. The search for Justine Valdez continued despite the dim hopes of her safe return. As her anxious parents prayed for her well-being, a thorough search was conducted in a wooded area south of Dublin, guided by a cryptic clue found near a castle. The search yielded Justine's purse, which contained her identification documents. Unfortunately, on May 21st, the search party discovered Justine's body. The autopsy revealed that Justine had been murdered on the evening of her abduction, with manual strangulation being the cause of death. Further examination showed that she had been subjected to a sexual assault, adding to the brutality of her demise. Amidst the sorrow and despair, a disturbing revelation emerged from the toxicological analysis. Justine's body contained trace amounts of prohibited substances. The presence of these substances raised many questions, with no clear explanation for their origin or purpose. Add a surprising twist to the case. Test results showed that Mark had ingested a substantial amount of these substances, making the circumstances surrounding the tragic events even more complex and difficult to understand. Mark's life had been spiraling out of control due to his struggles with alcohol and substance abuse, which likely contributed to the drugs found in Justine's system. His home life was also deteriorating, with frequent arguments with his spouse over his addiction and growing debts. Investigations revealed that Mark was actively using the dating app Tinder, where he was pursuing interactions with multiple women, including flirting with them at bars. Furthermore, his DNA was found on Justine's body, solidifying the police's suspicions of his involvement in her abduction and murder. As detectives pieced together the evidence, a disturbing narrative emerged. The murder was driven by Mark's sexual motives, and Justine became an innocent victim in his sinister quest. Mark had spotted Justine while following a bus and seized the opportunity to grab her off the street in broad daylight, despite the presence of multiple witnesses. A thorough examination of the victims' and perpetrators' phones revealed that they had no prior connection or communication. They had never met before, and there were no mutual connections between them. This grim revelation highlighted the tragic randomness of Justine's fate and the calculated brutality of Mark's actions. Upon closer examination, the detectives' initial assessment of the case changed significantly. It became clear that Mark was very familiar with the route Justine often took, suggesting that her murder was planned in advance rather than a spontaneous act. Mark had been carefully watching her movements, waiting for the right moment to strike. The day of the abduction was a deliberate break from his usual routine, as he intentionally positioned himself at the bus stop, following Justine's every move until he attacked her. The local community was deeply shaken by the tragic event, as such heinous acts were rare in their otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Many people rallied around the Justine family, offering them comfort and support during their time of immense loss. At the farewell ceremony, heartfelt tributes were paid to Justine, and white balloons were released into the sky, symbolizing hope in the midst of despair. Some attendees wore pink T-shirts with Justine's image, a touching tribute to her memory. Justine's family eventually decided to return to their native Philippines to lay her to rest, seeking comfort in familiar surroundings. However, they initially stayed abroad for a period before returning to Ireland in 2021, seeking a fresh start and new opportunities. They relocated to a different city and pursued new careers, which allowed them to heal from the painful memories that haunted them in their former home.